it's going to.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the July 13th meeting of the Planning Policy Commission. Tonight, we're going to hear some proposed amendments to the Issaquah Municipal Code, and I'm sure you're all here with interest to see what's going on. I must admit that I've been on this committee for a number of years, and I've never seen so many people here. So welcome. This, I feel very, I don't know, important tonight, so thanks. First thing on our agenda is the approval of the minutes from last meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I noticed that my name isn't on PBC members present, and I was there, if that can make a correction. Then,
We did have a substitute recorder, so, okay, that'll be changed. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I have a correction on page,
Let me get a second first. Do I have a second?
A second?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Now discussion.
okay, so I have a correction on page 11, 38, 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth paragraph from the bottom, last sentence, where it says, "We have enough to make the assessment on residential, office, retail, and hotel." Retail is not supposed to be there. No retail. That's it.
Anybody else?
Residential, office, and hotel.
Okay, so we have a correction from the minutes. Do you want to continue the approval based on the correction?
yes.
And the second?
Yes.
So no more discussion? Everybody in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. I do want to welcome you all here. It's really nice to see so many faces. One of the purposes of having us here, besides getting comment and helping the city, is to give you, the community members, the opportunity to make your ideas known to the city. And so I'm really thrilled that you're taking this opportunity to do this. First on that we're going to do, how we're going to handle this, is Jennifer is going to give us an update on what exactly the city wants to do, what changes are in the horizon, and why they are being proposed. And I've asked Jennifer to give me a 2-sentence update on exactly what we're looking at tonight. I know I've gotten a lot of comments, which I appreciate, from members of the community, but some of them were not actually on what we are discussing tonight. So I've asked Jennifer to just succinctly start the meeting with 2 sentences on exactly what we're looking at this evening. So Jennifer, please start your program.
All right. So the following presentation pertains to code amendments to provide urban development standards for new schools and government facilities. We are not proposing any development with these code amendments. We are not proposing any rezoning or changing of the zoning with these code amendments. So everything that is CFF, which is probably the reason why you all received letters in the mail from me, those are not changing. We're not proposing any development on those parcels as part of this code amendment.
You can't be heard.
I'm so sorry. Did you all hear me? Okay.
It would probably be good to
Repeat?
it for the people that might be watching.
So what I had said earlier, I'm
Jennifer,
sorry.
Jennifer, did you all hear her in the beginning? Okay.
Yes? You want me to repeat? No.
Yes,
Okay.
continue.
So the following presentation pertains to land use code amendments for urban schools and government facilities. We are not proposing any development with these code amendments. We're not proposing any zone changes with these amendments. As I stated a little bit earlier, you all probably received a letter in the mail from me, and the reason why is because you live within proximity to something zoned CFF. So, like I said, we're not proposing any rezoning. There won't be any development on these parcels as part of this proposed code amendment. What we're really doing is proposing code amendments to development standards. So it's how people would develop a property, not what they're going to develop it into. So I hope that's good clarification. So just to add to that, we will not be reviewing the annexation of the King County Island. The council is having 2 public hearings on potential pre-annexation zoning for parcels within the potential annexation area on July 17th and September 5th. On September 5th, there's also a public hearing scheduled for council to take action on that annexation. So that's something else that's happening, but I think maybe you all should be aware of that as an opportunity also. So with that, I'll start my presentation. Okay. So our proposed schedule, what happens after tonight is that we will go to the Council Land and Shore Committee at their August and their September meetings. And we hope, it's proposed, for council adoption on September 18th. So here's a map. This map is actually on our website now. So if you go to the public hearing, urban schools and government facilities webpage on the city's website, you can get to this map and you can zoom in, which I'm not going to do for these purposes. But if you were within 300 feet of any of these green properties on this map, you got a letter from me. And we sent out almost 3,000 letters. So that could be why we have so many people in the audience tonight. Those parcels shaded in green have a range of uses from school sites to stormwater ponds. So there's a lot of different kinds of community facilities on these parcels. What we're talking about tonight, though, specifically is future schools and future government buildings. So what is an urban school or government facility? So when we're talking about urban, we're talking about form. It means more efficient use of land, more compact development. The location is also very important for these facilities, as uses need to be close to the customers that they're serving. So, and school locations need to be determined where there are service gaps. So there's specific places where these uses need to go. So let's use the schools as an example. The siting standard for an elementary school is about 10 acres. And they need that to fulfill all their programmatic needs and all of their parking and everything else that's required for that kind of school.
Quick clarifying question, that citing standard is based upon Issaquah zoning or based upon like a typical what a school would expect?
The latter.
Okay, thank you.
So under the current conditions, I'm sure if all you looked around the city, you would notice that land availability is becoming scarcer and scarcer. And so that makes it more expensive, I guess. So an urban elementary school siting, if it occurred on a smaller property, it would need to have a taller building. They might need to have some structured parking. They might need to really concentrate on how they use that land programmatically for play fields and other things. So everything would be more compact. So that's an example of how a school is finding land today, how they develop a school today. So the purpose of the code amendments is currently our standards don't meet the needs of the Issaquah School District. And as we continue to grow, we have less land to grow into. And so by allowing denser development, less land is needed to accommodate the growth needs for schools and for city buildings, which the community will benefit from. So for instance, if we get a 10-acre parcel, but they only develop 7 acres, because that's all they need, we have that 3 acres left over to use elsewhere for another purpose. So how would we apply this new code? So for new schools and new buildings on existing school sites, which we have several in the city now, under the proposed code, they would have new standards, including development standards, which are things like height and building setbacks and impervious surface coverage. They might have new standards for tree retention, minimum tree densities, and tree replacement standards. and new landscape standards for structured parking, because those don't exist in our code right now, to the extent that they do in another code. So also, most of our school sites are currently non-conforming in some way, shape, or form. And that has to do with when we passed the CFF zoning and put the zoning on the schools. The schools were already there. So when they were zoned, they were already non-conforming in a lot of different ways. But only sites that are zoned CFF where the development was specifically for a public school or government facility would use this proposed code. So expansions of existing facilities fall under a different section of the code, and they would be treated a little bit differently. So we're really just talking about new school buildings and, say, expansions that don't meet the non-conforming approval requirements that would allow them to expand under the current code.
Another clarifying question before we
Sure.
dive into this. So all of these sites that are zoned CFF, they all currently could be developed as a school or some other facility, and all we're doing is we're changing how it's developed. We're not changing whether or not a particular building could be built on a particular site.
Yes, and I would just say that schools are an allowed use in the CFF zone.
Correct. So there is no open space that currently you cannot build a school building on that you are now able to build. All it is, you're able to build a school that is shaped differently.
Generally speaking, yes.
Oh, yes, generally speaking. Okay.
So let's use an example. So let's say the existing code versus the proposed code. And if we're going to say the existing code, we have to make some assumptions, because the existing code says that new schools are going to develop as per the most restrictive contiguous zoning. So if you're commercial on one side and you're residential on the other side, the most restrictive contiguous zoning is going to be the residential. And so they would develop using the residential standards. And so I picked a single-family small lot because it's in the middle of a bunch of the other single-family standards in terms of the actual prescriptive standards, so setbacks, building heights, and whatnot, just to use as a comparison. So if we look at the applicable codes, under the proposed code, there would actually be more standards applicable to school and government facility sites. So that would include the Issaquah Municipal Code, which is currently how schools are developed now, or it's the code under which schools are developed now. But in addition, under the proposed code, we would also implement the Central Issaquah landscape standards, and including those for trees, tree retention, density, and replacements. And then we would also implement the sub-area design guidelines. So Old Town has its own design standards. Central Issaquah has its own design standards. If you look to the right at the existing code, you won't notice those other two pieces in there, because currently schools or government facilities in CFF don't have to apply those standards. We're proposing that they would. So next would be the levels of review. So we're proposing that they go through a level 3 review. And what that means is they have to go to a public hearing to the Development Commission and have their plans approved at a public hearing. And that would be the process that we're recommending. Currently, depending on where they're located, because schools don't necessarily have to be in a CFF zone, they're a level 2 review. There's some, I guess, different existing school sites have different land use plans that they've developed over the years. So this would be really just for new schools or those schools that don't meet the non-conforming approval criteria. So to go to the development standards, which are those prescriptive standards, FAR doesn't exist in the IMC. So
For our audience, can you explain what FAR is?
and I was about to unpack all of that. So FAR is floor area ratio, and instead of thinking of a building envelope in terms of building height and where the setbacks are, you're thinking about it more of how the building covers the land and how many floors it takes to cover that land. So if we have an FAR of, say, 1, which is a very easy number to use, you would be able to cover the whole site with one building. Or you could cover half the site with 2 levels of a building. Or you could do the math there from then out. And there's different mechanisms by which you could have a floor area ratio of 1. So what we're proposing is that they have a minimum floor area ratio of 0.75, which means they have to cover, and however that happens, 3/4 of the land they use, no matter what. So it's a minimum.
No, it's not they have to cover the land. They have to build a structure that's large enough that it's equal to 1/3 of the land.
Yes.
3/4.
Yeah.
3/4 of the land in this case.
But it's not, but I just want to clarify for the audience, it's not that 3/4 of the land must be covered, because it's actually capped at, I think, well, no, it's capped at 90%. But you can easily build a building that's less than half the land cover, assuming you have a 2-story building.
Exactly, assuming you go up instead of out. So that's a very good distinction, and I appreciate that. So the maximum there that we're proposing is 2. So to use AJ's math, 2 is much bigger than 0.75, but 2 is basically covering, well, let's just say you could cover half the land with the building and it could have 4 floors. Okay, I do math much easier that way. Okay, so down to setbacks. Setbacks are a little bit different to the way we're proposing them. So instead of being set back from the street, what you'll notice at the very top is that we are requiring a build-to line, which is similar to what we do in Central Issaquah, but instead of saying, we want you to set yourself back from the street by this many feet, instead we're saying we want you to build to the street by this many feet, and you can't go back any farther than 20 feet. Okay? In the SFSL zone, so if we were going to go to the existing code, the SFSL zone says you have to be set back 10 feet or more from the street side. And then your other setbacks, you see the side in what we're proposing is 7 feet. The side in this particular district is 6 feet for the existing code, rear 7 feet, rear 20 feet, proposed code to existing code. Just to show you some of the different kind of setbacks that would be required in the proposed code versus the existing code. So next is building height. There's a big difference between the building height we're proposing and what would otherwise be allowed in single-family zones. And I think this really highlights some of the difficulties that the schools find in trying to develop to their programmatic needs, because if you're developing next to a single-family zone, most of the heights are a max of 30 feet. So we're proposing 65 feet. And 65 feet would also help achieve the floor area ratios that we're also proposing. Impervious surface is another one like building height. So we're proposing 90% coverage. And what would be allowed in the assumption zone of SFSL would be 50%. So half of the lot could be covered in that instance. So other development and design standards that would be required. So we just talked about that a little bit. But how we do design review in the existing code is through something called the green sheets. And it's a long list of guidelines to be followed. And they're not necessarily requirements in the code, but more general guidelines to follow for site design, architecture, and things to that degree. So next section is really the landscape and trees, and there was a comparison that I did in your packet to kind of try and show all of the differences because it's pretty detailed. The code is for trees, as it regards trees. But to do a very quick comparison of the two, the retention requirement, which is how many trees you retain on site when you develop, and we normally deal with those in terms of percentages, and we deal in, it's very mathematical. We deal in caliper inches, and it's cumulative in the developable site area, which does not include critical areas or their buffers. So if you're next to a wetland and you have a 50-foot setback from your wetland, it doesn't include any of the wetland or that 50-foot setback. So this is really just the developable site area. So in the proposed code, what we're saying is, because we would be using Central Issaquah standards, we're saying that you could reduce your tree retention to 0%. However, you have to get an administrative adjustment of standards, which is a flexible standard that requires a land use permit, and it requires a level, what it's been elevated to very, very recently is a level 2 review, which requires public notification to neighbors within 300 feet, and you're required to do replacements. If you can't replace, then you're required to pay into the city's tree fund, and then we will take those monies and plant trees with them. In the city, in the IMC, under the existing code, the retention rate is the same. It's 25%. But the administrative adjustment of standards only allows you to reduce that by half, which comes out to be 12.5%. It still requires the level 2 review as well, which requires the public notification. So the next one is density. Minimum density is maintaining, it's just like dwelling units on a property. If you have a minimum density requirement, you're required to say have four dwelling units per acre. A minimum density for trees is you're required to have, in this case, in both cases, you're required to have 4 trees for every 5,000 square feet that you have. And it's the same, it would be the same either as we proposed it or as it exists in the code today. Replacement, tree replacement, in the proposed code could be on-site, off-site, or like I said, you could pay into the city's tree fund, and we would take those monies to plant trees. In the existing code, it's the same thing. It's the exact same process. So the last one is structured parking landscape. And very generally speaking, the difference between the proposed code and the existing code is that it is a more urban type of planting that we're proposing. You could use a green screen instead of having to have a 5-foot wide planting strip. There's just some alternatives that still provide the green, but maybe don't take up as much space. In addition, we have rooftop screening requirements in Central Issaquah. We do not have those in the IMC. And when I mean rooftop screening, I mean screening the actual top of a parking deck, because now maybe we have taller buildings and people have to look onto that parking deck. So the idea is that you're visually screening or making it a little better to look at over time.
So it's an aesthetic thing,
Yes.
not like shade for the cars.
Well, of course you have the shade,
Okay.
which is important as well. So, let's see here. We talked about non-conforming situation. Okay, so does anybody have any questions? Because my next slide asks for questions about anything we've gone over tonight. I have a feeling we'll have a lot of questions about the table, so I'm happy to pull that back up.
Can you keep the prior page up?
Yes. Hold on one second. I think you have public comment.
If you would wait till public comment, she will be available during public comment to answer any questions you have, okay? Let's just finish the...
Yeah, the questions are for the commission. You guys will have the opportunity to ask questions
Yes.
during the public comment.
Yes,
It's a timing thing.
You'll have time. I promise. You'll have all the time you need to ask any question you have. Go.
I don't have a question.
Okay, my question was, simply, it's why? Why, why those particular numbers? Why do you need such a limited amount of space? And how did you come up with 7 instead of 20? What are the parameters? How did you create this?
So we did work with the school district, and they did their own site planning kind of experiment to try and figure out exactly what they could whittle it all down to. And it also depends on the type of school. Elementary schools are the smallest sited schools, so you could get smaller lots for elementary schools. Middle schools maybe need a little bit bigger, and then high schools maybe a little bit bigger. But we worked with the school district to try and figure out exactly what they needed to fulfill their programmatic requirements, but then also to try and relate it to standards that we have that we know work a certain way. And when I say that, I mean they provide an urban form that would complement the need to really provide more compact development for schools.
So one of the things is the city council and the school board had a joint meeting a couple Januaries ago after the school passed their bond, and they knew they were going to have to build four new schools to accommodate the growth that was coming. And one of the things that was part of that conversation was how can the city and the school district work better together to help facilitate that need within our community. And one of the things that was identified is our current zoning code really doesn't accommodate the construction of schools very well. So the ask was, could the city look at revising some of its code language to help facilitate the development of the new schools? And so that's really what this is coming along saying, you know, knowing that we're really trying to be more efficient with the land that we have, the land that they have, you know, how can you do that in a way that is still compatible with adjacent uses? And so that's what, that's where this came from. And as Jennifer mentioned, we asked the school district, you know, why don't you propose standards? Because we don't want to change the standards and still have them not work for you, right? And so part of where these numbers came from Issaquah School District.
Keith, can you introduce yourself?
I can, thank you. So I'm Keith Niven, I'm the city's Economic Development and Development Services Director.
So the land that we're looking to revise the zoning on, is this land that some of which is already owned by the school district, or is this simply rezoning land that then the school district would then have to go out and acquire a particular parcel and develop for one of the 4 new schools? Or is it both?
So we're not changing the zoning per se. We're changing the standards associated with a specific zoning district for specific uses.
Okay, yes, true, yes. The zone of these parcels is not changing, but
Right.
everything with this zoning will have new standards.
Specifically only for urban schools and for government facilities. There are standards
yes,
for for standards for utility facilities and all kinds of things in this section.
Got it,
but we're
understood.
only-
But I think to answer your question, so if the school district purchased a property that they don't own today, that's maybe zoned residential or something like that, and we then rezoned it, then whatever standards would be in place would then apply to that property.
But the act of rezoning that
That's
land that's not currently CFC, I think is what this is? CFF, that act of rezoning would be a totally distinct action by the council that would go through its own separate public process.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. Yes.
Anybody else? Are you done?
Yes.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I have a question. What is the kind of existing adopted policy related to this whole urban school discussion? And is there really something that solidly says that's been adopted by this community that says, yes, we all agree that urban schools is a necessary part of this, and this is what that looks like?
That's a great question. I had some slides that have those policies on them. That's one. Here we go. Here's a pretty big one. So here's the first one. We agreed to the King County-wide policy displayed on the screen. This is a very long policy, and I will very quickly summarize it while you all, if you want to read it. So I will talk slowly. But basically, the school districts need to provide schools within the urban areas. So outside of the urban areas is off limits to them. And in order to assist them in doing that, there are 4 strategies, which are the 4 orange bullets there on the screen. And those strategies are things that the county has told us to try and do to assist schools in finding and locating new school sites. The one I've bolded is the one, basically this is a reason why we're here today. So it says school design standards that reduce land requirements such as multi-story structures or reduce footprint while still meeting programmatic needs. So that's the King County-wide policy. We also have multiple policies in the comprehensive plan, and I'm happy to pull those up as well, that tell us, the city, that we should work with the school district in finding sites and co-locating recreational uses and those kinds of things. Basically, the story is working together. So if you'd like me to, I can go through those policies, but I thought this was the big one. This was the one that basically provoked all of the policies that I'm referring to that are in the comp plan.
Okay, so that's kind of an overarching policy that we've agreed to because we're in King County with Seattle and Bellevue and all those cities. Is there anything specific to Issaquah that's talked about potential sites for urban schools? And, you know, are we talking just about the central Issaquah area, or, you know, how do we keep it consolidated to the areas that we've identified as we want them to be urban rather than some of the areas that are not necessarily in what we would consider urban but are still already CFF?
To the specificity that you're describing, we do not have that level of plan. So we're not going out to find general areas where a school could find a property. That's not a written map or anything like that. But we do have, like I had stated earlier, we do have policies that tell us to help schools in a multitude of different ways, and this is one of them.
I think, can I make a comment? I think Trish might have emailed us when we had asked a clarifying question earlier. It was asked whether or not the city has any plans or visions on where schools are, and then the answer is no. The school district probably has some sort of strategic plan on where they think they could put schools, but the city does not have an opinion on where schools ought to be when you're looking at specific sites.
As long as they're inside the urban growth area, they can't go outside. They can't go up to outside.
Correct,
To
but
Bay
round
Valley or
circle.
anything, yeah.
Definitely, yeah, but I think, but also anything that's within Issaquah municipal boundaries is by definition within the urban growth boundary. So there are no, I believe there are no parts of the city of Issaquah that would be off limits from a school. Though, to go back to Keith's comment, if the city of Issaquah, if the school district bought a piece of land that was zoned for, say, single-family zones, the school district would still need to go to the city to ask for a rezone away from, say, single-family zone before they could begin to apply for a permit for a school. Is that all correct?
Yes, and additionally, in the proposed code, we're saying you also have to go to a public hearing for your land use plan, so your development plans.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I want to,
So the school district would take an option on a piece of property and then spend all the time and get the community input, and then go ahead and purchase the property. They just wouldn't go out and buy the property.
Yes.
so I want to take it back to that urban schools idea. Have we had community input and feedback? We haven't had a meeting asking the community about their vision of schools and whether or not that matches with the school district's idea of moving toward urban schools.
Isn't that what this meeting is? I mean, this is, I believe this is the first public touch point we've had for the zoning, correct?
I feel like this meeting is talking about the zoning in a way that wasn't necessarily communicated to, for example, the PTAs or anything like that in talking about, do we want urban schools as an idea?
Well, I don't think they, at this point in time, because of the limited land, I don't think they have a choice but to go into some form of urban schools. And that brings up a point. I would like to hold the rest of your comments, because some of the people in the audience might trigger some other comments from you. So I would like to open the public hearing.
Can I ask one more clarifying question?
Yeah, you can, but
Sure.
wait, there is a sign-up sheet. Has everybody who wants to speak tonight signed up on that sheet? Okay, ask your question.
All right, so this is a bit of a loaded question. I'm going to make a comment disguised as a question. So when you say urban school, really you just mean a denser, more efficient school, and that's really all that the word urban is trying to evoke.
It's really all about the form, yes.
Okay, so it's not urban in the sense of you want it to be this bigger thing. It's just the idea that it's denser.
More compact, yes.
Okay, so I've opened up the public hearing, and the first person on the list is Ronald and Carol, and I can't read your writing, so if you would like to come to the microphone, introduce yourself, where you live, and because there are so many of you, I'm going to do what the city council does and basically limit you to between 3 and 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'm Ronald Lebeco. I live at 716 7th Avenue Northwest. And my question is really regarding the term other government facilities. And in particular, the thing that comes to my mind is how that might apply to something like the recycling center.
I believe the answer is it doesn't. I think this rezone is only for schools, correct?
No.
No?
For
All
others.
And
CFF.
government facilities.
CFF.
Thank you.
So.
It's a
we
fair
have-
question.
So we have a question on the floor that hasn't been answered. Would you like to take that?
Excited. Sorry, I was super excited. I figured out how to use the timer. So,
I'm just
did I hear
putting fear
recycling
into them
center?
of 3 and 5 minutes.
So we started with schools, and then we said, well, right now, what's allowed in CFF is schools and other government buildings. And so we went ahead and just pushed them both forward. We don't have any plans to build, so I got into this side conversation about, well, what about at the cemetery? We're talking about a 5-story crypt being built there, and I thought, well, that could actually be kind of cool. But, we're not talking about, let me say we don't have any plans for government buildings. If ultimately that's a big sticking point for either the commission or the community, I'd say we could pull it off, because frankly, there isn't any plans for any municipal building period at the moment. Really what we did this for was schools. And so if ultimately we want to pare this down to just schools because that's a consternation point, I think that's absolutely open for a conversation. I used half your time.
Thank you.
Oh, wait.
Okay.
Do you want to do 4 minutes, Joan, or 5? 4 minutes or 5? 5?
I'm Hooker Hailstone. I own the property at 320 Northwest Holly Street.
Holly.
And right now, I know that there is a plan to have a bridge come across from the creek that comes down to Holly Street there, which would be for the kids to cross. And also, I don't know what they're planning and where they're planning on putting their parking lot and that. Not to mention that most of that area out there is floodplain, which is why it's getting condensed so much and they're going higher, which does not appeal to me. Right? Okay. That, where is all of this traffic going to be going and coming through there? I mean, is it going to be, because there's one entrance into the school, there's one exit out of the school, and if they're putting some other buildings in there at the administration point, those people are going to be coming and going all the time, and where are they going to be coming and going to? There's a bunch of stuff, because I haven't seen any design plan for what's happening. So I would like to see something in black and white that I can look at and have an idea of what's happening.
I don't know if anybody can hear you, so you have to.
Well, I wanted to make sure she.
Yeah, she knows.
So that's some of my concerns, because we're going to be adding so much traffic right in there. Are we going to continue with what we have there, or are we going to be opening up other things that are going to become a problem?
Well, I think that the answer is to that is the city's going to have to do their homework and make sure that the kids are safe and that there's enough egress and in and out of the facility. I don't think any of us have seen plans of what they're going to do to the administration building.
Yeah, but I
And,
mean,
and in essence, that's not something in the way of transportation that we're going to discuss this evening. I'd like to limit the discussion tonight just on the zoning and what the community thinks about the change in zoning for schools. And so I think that question is valid, and it should be looked at in a different concept of trying to find out how to address transportation in the new, because they're going to tear down the administration building, right, and change that, I think.
Maybe. I mean,
Maybe.
so the concerns that you have are really, I'm going to stop this so it doesn't buzz on me. So the concerns that you have are going to be site-specific for a particular school in a particular location. Like I said, the school district is moving forward looking for sites for 2 elementary schools, a middle school, and a high school. And, you know, for each of those sites, when they pick one, there's going to be the issues of critical areas and traffic and all the other things that they're going to try and manage on the site, like, you know, all of them have different play area needs and parking needs and all of those kind of things. So until those plans are drawn up and submitted to the city, I don't think any of us know exactly what that looks like. What Jennifer mentioned earlier, and I want to kind of go back to that point, is the process that we're proposing is when those development plans are prepared and submitted by the school, that they would become part of a public process that would go through our development commission, and there'd be an opportunity not only for you to express your concerns or interest in that at that time, but also we have a different commission that typically looks at land plans and has a different lens for kind of commenting on that, and ultimately will make decisions on those.
well, I had set in on some of the stuff on the park that's just above us, and what their process is and what they were doing for the bridges and all of that. Because I lived on this area up until 90, that I knew most of the floods and things that come through there. And I wanted to make sure that they had, I mean, I've still got pictures of some of the stuff that was not quite so nice.
So why don't we table this particular subject? I have your email here, and the city will then have it, and they can get back to you and for any further questions or concerns that you may have. Would that work with you guys? Thank you. Gary. Is Gary Shinkowski?
That's me, I'm here, thank you. My issues and questions
You have to go to the,
were asked and answered
Oh.
in the
Okay.
presentation,
okay.
so
Okay.
I'm a happy camper.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Nice to know that. Fran and Bob. I wish I could pronounce it, but maybe you will when you come to.
Would you
please,
like-
or
would
Would
you-
you like to come?
Oh,
You just
Awesome.
signed up. Okay. Okay. Susan?
the good news is it's kind of going in a row, so you'll know who the next one is.
Okay. Well.
Hello, good evening, everybody. My name is Susan Haas. Do you want my address or just my town or?
Address would be, it's the
Address?
normal, yes.
Okay. I live at 19524 Southeast 24th Place in Sammamish, and I sell art cards to the Cleanscapes Arcology store in Gilman Village, and I'm a volunteer at the Food and Clothing Bank in Issaquah, so I have a lot of connection to Issaquah, even though I live in Sammamish. And I am very much against this amendment, this proposal, and I want to tell you why. I have studied this sort of thing a lot in my education. I have a master's in regional planning, in land use planning, and transportation. And I also like to cook, and sometimes when I cook things, I think, wouldn't, this tastes nice, and this tastes nice, and this tastes nice. Wouldn't it be fun if it all were in one pot? But sometimes it just doesn't work out. And the way I feel about this amendment is just that. I think there are some good intentions and positive directions, such as the King County intention to have school design standards that reduce land requirements, such as using multi-story or reduced footprints. And I think there could have been a lot more public involvement before all these details got etched into a presentation and all that work was put into it. So, but the reason why I think this is a recipe that just doesn't work is that I have volunteered over 400 hours lately on the different potential uses for Providence Heights in Issaquah, and their group has come up with maybe 53 different uses besides a school site. And the thing is with this zoning, it's like a net that's killing whales, because it basically captures our precious green spaces, our green open spaces in the hinterlands of Issaquah, and it also captures treed hillsides. So this sort of zoning detail is extremely inappropriate for those resources. They need to be kept as they are, and I think a good zoning for those resources, which would be CF-OS. So anyway, because what needs to happen is that people use the resources at hand to make more urban-style schools, if that's the interest in the broader community. But those need to be in places that are, for example, already cleared, already graded, just absolutely prime for schools, and that the community is interested in. And all these details about reducing setbacks, reducing tree retention requirements, increasing impervious surfaces that are allowed, those would be all disastrous. And the height of a building, I think that needs to be on a case-by-case basis, the height of a school, because this zoning is, sprinkled throughout Issaquah. And those parcels are all near people who live there. Thank you.
Lindy? Lindy?
My name is Lindy Hisatomi, and I live on Sunset Court, across from the cemetery. And I didn't know a lot about this issue, except that our neighborhood sent the information out to us to come and attend and start to understand what this is about. And just in the last half hour, it appears very clearly that, as Susan said, that we're putting a lot of looser zoning on all these different areas that are quite variable in terms of green space, cemeteries, up on the Issaquah Plateau, down in the city. And so it looks like what you're trying to do is meet the needs of schools and allow them to put schools in areas where we need them. But it seems inappropriate to spread this within the bounds of the city and then loosen all of these areas and make them open for development, because it's aimed at schools, but it also says and other city facilities, which, as Susan said, could be lots of things. And so I think many of us have come here tonight concerned that you're overlaying lighter zoning rules in a wide disparate areas where you have green belts and hills and ravines and creeks, and it just seems inappropriate to widely apply this. And perhaps it could be more concisely stated that it's part of either parcels that the schools currently have or parcels to be developed for schools. And as you said, for schools to have options for this area and then go to the city council to discuss how does that specific site impact that specific area. So that's my 2 cents.
Kate?
Kate Lazat, 380 Southeast R Street. So I live very close to the Issaquah High School and the Issaquah Middle School now. And I do agree that we should uncouple the school zoning along with the other facility zoning. I don't think that the two of them match up really well. The other thing that I'd like to know is, we're talking about all the zoning. Number one would be, my concern would be the height of the buildings, because right now, as high as those buildings are, they're blocking the view that a lot of us want to live in Issaquah for. So Tiger Mountain is not a clear shot from my house anymore. It used to be, but it's not anymore. But the other thing would be that we don't know exactly what's included in the zoning. So they've built the middle school and the high school. They haven't added any sidewalks. They haven't slowed down the kids around the corner. They haven't added any just things that have to do with, like, how is the parking going to be monitored? How is the parking going to be watched? And how is the traffic on the street, the ingress and the egress? How is that all going to happen? So we don't know, when we vote for this zoning, how the school is actually going to apply any of the rules around that. So that would be my concern is, yes, the zoning for being a more urban area and being on a smaller footprint sounds great. But the reality is, what else are they doing within that zoning? So those would be my concerns on that.
I think you'll get some of your answers because the president of the school board is here tonight to talk. So
That's
if you want.
great. Thank you.
Barbara Wood?
I did not check the box that says if you want to speak.
That's the only name I could pronounce. Linda? Linda?
I didn't check it either, but I think I do have something I would
Well,
like.
please come to, I mean, that's why we're here to listen to you.
Well, I've listened carefully, I think. I've listened carefully to
Please
the
introduce yourself.
Pardon?
Introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Linda Crummins. I lived in Issaquah for 28 years. Taught in the Issaquah School District for much of that time, and then moved to the Seattle School District for the last 5 years. I was just, when my husband and I built our house in Issaquah, there were no stoplights anywhere in town. There were none. And we loved Issaquah. We just loved it. It was, yes, it was a tree city. And that's probably because there weren't too many buildings yet. But time changes things, and it changed for us. And we started seeing more buildings being built. We started seeing more congestion on the roads. And it became unpleasant. My husband passed away in 2001, and I ended up moving up to Mount Vernon because my mother was sick. But Issaquah, when I come back to see it, it still continues to change, and it will continue to change. Whether we want it to or not, it's uncomfortable change. It can be very uncomfortable. But what we have right now, because I was connected to the Issaquah School District for so long, what we have right now is a real problem. we've got kids who are stacked into portables. I mean, I still have friends who teach in Issaquah, and it's crowded. It's real crowded. And it's going to get more crowded as Gateway opens and other building around here continues to spread. So I'm just putting a plea in for the Issaquah School District. I want to see something that will help them because I know what it's like to teach in a classroom that's way too crowded.
Thank you.
That's it.
Jake?
Good evening. Is it on? I'm Jake Cooper, the Chief Financial and Operating Officer for Issaquah School District. Oh, and thank you, Mr. Niven, for turning the light on.
You tend to be long-winded sometimes.
Indeed. I come before you obviously speaking in favor of the code amendment. I have a member of my technical staff will speak after this, Mr. Crawford, Director of Capital Projects, and 2 elected board members. I come before you tonight, a man frustrated with trying to find property, one that has to comply with Growth Management Act and the reinterpretation by the GMPC recently. We recently sold 80 acres that were banked outside of the UGA in Winterbrook Farm, sold the 80 acres. We had conversations with all of your elected officials in an open public meeting and talked about what could they do to help us site and facilitate the siting of schools in the city of Issaquah. And we said, change your codes, because every time we build something, we have to ask for a variance. So just for your point of reference, Clark Elementary, IMS, and Issaquah High School, all up the street, are all at the 65-foot mark. Variances were granted by the city each time accordingly. What we're really running into is, given property runs between, on the low end, $750, on the high end, $2.25 million an acre for land, and we need to site accordingly. And we're looking at, and the rule of thumb was given by staff. Rule of thumb is just a general OSPI guidance, 10 acres for an elementary, 15 to 20 for a middle, and between up to 40 acres for a comprehensive high school. You start to do the math on that. We have a willing constituency. Our recent bond of $533 million passed by over 70%. So we have the cash to be able to execute the deals. The problem is land is very, very hard to come by, competing with some of the most aggressive and largest developers in the whole world, not even in the United States or in the region. So I implore you to make, I know you're not take any action tonight, but if you're going to hear any testimony, hear from me. I've been battling growth for nearly 15 years in the schools district as their CFO, 500 kids a year. We potentially would site 4 schools within the municipality that could serve an additional 4,000 students. Remember, we are responding to growth. We've never issued a building permit, ever. That is not our game. We respond to growth, and we open our schools full. We have 230 plus portable classrooms. That is the equivalent of roughly, well, we built our elementary schools, just to put in perspective, around 32. So you can do the math on how many equivalent freestanding schools we need to accommodate our portable growth. So I'm not going to belabor the point. We need denser development on both our existing property and any future acquisitions, even though we'd have to go through council approval. I'm more than willing to answer any technical questions you may have, and then I also have staff available as needed.
Thank you.
Anything?
Ann?
I don't think so. I don't think we have
Okay.
any technical questions.
Yeah. Ann? You, Steve?
Steve Crawford, Director of Capital Projects for the Issaquah School District. A number of points have been discussed, but as we see the community and our cities continue to grow, the enrollment grows, we have to find space for new kids. And we have been moving towards urban schools, although we haven't gotten as far as we really need to get. Issaquah High was built as a 3-story building. We initially started Issaquah Middle School as a 2-story and realized that we need to compact that footprint even more. It's gone in as a 3-story building. Clark Elementary is going to be our largest elementary school, but it's also going to be our first 3-story elementary school. Part of the idea of the higher density allows us to compact the footprint of the building, allows compaction of the overall site required. So instead of perhaps a 10-acre site that you have for a Grand Ridge Elementary, If you can move down to a 7-acre site, there's 3 other acres that are reserved for other things or remain in open space or trees or whatever, depending on where you might be. It's just a critical issue that needs to be addressed to be able to accommodate the growth inside the urban growth boundary line. There's just no other room to grow. Land is really scarce. There are no parcels with no development on them that have for sale signs on them, and we're really challenged and have to be creative in terms of condensing our footprints as much as we can to fit things in where possible. Let's see here. Another thing that the smaller footprints allows us to put schools more closely located to the neighborhoods that they're serving. That's really important from a number of reasons. A, creates that community identity, provides for the opportunity for more of the students to be walking rather than transported either by bus or by parents from their residential areas into a more distant school. It saves the corresponding trips from an area into another area of the city, reduces your traffic, helps reduce congestion. There's a lot of things that are good, a lot of things that help with sustainability goals and being green that come from reducing the footprints of our buildings and reducing the site areas that we need for schools.
Thank you. Lisa. You can introduce yourself if you would.
Thank you. Okay. I'm Lisa Callan. I'm on the Issaquah School Board. Director Moore is also here, who's also on the school board. I'm the current residing president of the school board, and I live at 3153 Northeast Marquette Way in Issaquah. I am an Issaquah resident, and I have a child that's in the Issaquah School District. So just a couple of things. I know that Mr. Cooper or Mr. Crawford described some of the things, but some of the questions that have come up. I want to invite anybody that has questions about our school sites and our school plans and our growth and the bond construction or any of our remodels or any of that to please come and speak to us also in the school board meetings. We hold our meetings the 2nd and 4th Wednesdays. There'll be August 2nd and 4th. In August will be the next opportunities, and that will be before the next public hearing. There'll be two public hearings for the city council on zoning, which is separate than the topic that we're talking about tonight. But we love to hear from you directly on your concerns about things like school egress, sidewalks, safety, all of that kind of stuff. And certainly any building that we do, any construction would have to go through a very public process, and we certainly have community engagement opportunities to talk with the neighbors of any change. So what might be happening around the administration building site and what might be happening with Holly, we'll certainly be having community conversations around that and how that might impact you and what the designs of the egress would look like, and would love to have that participation. It's often like with the commissions and the committees and the councils, we just don't get as much input that we like directly from the public, and we just really welcome that. With regards to tonight, talking about land use codes, it really is around our ability to try to use less land to build the schools that we need to build. So if we stick to current codes, and if we are looking for ways to find to actually build schools and get those cute little bottoms into seats for all of those 500 kids that we're growing each year. And how do we do that? The object here is, do we need to buy more parcels and figure out how to do that to meet the current codes, or can we buy less land and condense and be more efficient with the land that we have? And so hopefully instead of the 10 acres for elementary, we can look at 7 acres, for example, right? So we're saving that land use. So just to acknowledge that, I'm a big fan of the environment. The school district is too. We always try to site our schools with as much respect to the local landscape as we can, and to integrate it into that as well as into the community, and also try to appreciate community values. So we want to tie that all in. So if we talk about land code use tonight here and where we are with that. That allows, once the code use is defined for CFF zoning, right? Then whenever a school district is going for that CFF zoning, we have to apply to those rules. Anything outside of that CFF zoning is not something that we can go build a school in. So that has to go through its own public hearing process. So just to be very clear around that. And we respect that process, and we look forward to having those discussions in that very public process. So whether it's open space or it should be a facilities conversation, we want to engage in that process, and we want to respect that. So we want to honor that. And I don't know if you had any specific questions, but we are all here to answer those questions specifically around land use and then also school-specific stuff. We're very happy to have sideboard conversations afterwards, too, with anybody, and be there for that.
Thank you, Lisa.
Okay.
We have another Lisa.
My name is Lisa Milkowski. I live at 890 Lingering Pine Lane. That's in Tallis. This is not an amendment about schools. It is about making development easy and frankly sloppy, in my opinion. As I said, I'm in Tallis, in a hillside development, and we've had enough issues with hasty development. Don't allow amendments that allow clear cutting of parcels, whoever it is, or allow for continued hasty development. Come up with a plan that is really about school sites, if that's what this is about. Make it sound like, this is making it sound like it's about schools, but it's really about more than schools here. Okay, it sounds real cute, we're talking about the kids, but it's about more than that, really. It's about hasty development. I'm a mother of 3 kids. They're all in the Issaquah School District. I volunteer a lot at the school. I used to be an educator myself at the college level. Think carefully about it, okay? Don't do it hasty.
I know you were supposed to check if you really wanted to speak tonight, but some of the other people that have come up were not checked, so I'm going to go through this list. Does either Terry or Judy Legg would like to speak?
That list came around, I signed it. I didn't know I was signing up to talk. I thought I would get pizza. Where is the pizza?
Right over there.
Charlie, would you like to speak? No? Cooper?
+1 for the school zoning.
Okay. Tom?
Hi, I'm Tom Huffnagel. We have a property that's up against the lakeside, sand and gravel. I just want to be clear, it's commercial right now. Our property is zoned. Can that be changed to school and take away the commercial? And then the other thing is, a couple years ago, they put in a marijuana store next to us. So I'm assuming no school will come close to that. Is that a correct?
Director's nodding.
Okay.
That's an option?
Be happy kids, but I'm hoping they can't build a school there.
No, there's separation requirements from the green businesses and schools, and then the process is there's no change of zoning. So if you've got a commercial parcel, it's going to stay commercial. If the school district wants to come and buy your property and buy out the marijuana business and put a school there, they can. That's part of their process, but that's not what we're talking about today.
Okay, thank you.
Donna?
The one with all the green dots?
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Make it big. Oh, thank you.
So I'm Donna Robinson, and we own a house on Northwest Dogwood, and my daughter owns a house on 2nd and Bush, so we're residents of Issaquah, and we're excited to be here. The house that we own, we're remodeling, so we're becoming very familiar with the planning department and the inspection people, and all the requirements, because we're close to the creek. So we've become very familiar with the city policies and things. So one thing that I did want to point out to this map is there are quite a few green dots that if you don't kind of zoom in on, you don't realize that are about a half acre, a third of an acre, 2 acres, something that the schools wouldn't even possibly be able to use. But if you don't limit it to schools, and I'm sorry, I heard Jennifer very clearly say that the schools were an example of the code changes here, that it wasn't limited to schools. So I would really encourage the council to limit it. If schools is what we're trying to solve here, then let's limit it, because it's a slippery slope otherwise. And I guarantee you, before a school ever gets close to one of these other properties, a government facility, a city facility will see a solution here for them, and we'll be right back here trying to argue it, and we've lost space already, okay? So I am 100%, I have open space next to me. They've talked about maybe putting a play yard in there or anything like that. Do it. That'd be great. I would be 100% supportive of that. But this general government facility or city facilities, it's way too broad. So I really, please, you already had one of your team go, oh, wait, what are we talking about here? So let's be clear, okay? So the second thing I want to talk about is the permeable ground and changing it to 90%. We are a wet community. That the city, the county, Washington State is requiring a lot of work and a lot of our tax dollars to go into us not flooding anymore, if possible. There are culverts being built for fish and adjusting things that were screwed up years and years ago. And so just kind of take a look at that, you know, articles in the newspaper and stuff. You go to 90% not permeable, you go to that, I see nothing in that code that's addressing where all the drainage, and you can say, oh no, we have those, that's part of the municipal code and everything. No, my property is required to have 50% non-permeable. I really worry if you are not very specific about the code that we're going to add to the drainage water, we're going to add to runoff, and, you know, look at hillsides, they're sliding down all around. You know, let's be very clear and careful about what we're doing there, okay? And then the last thing is just kind of an administrative thing. When you put a link in the letter, could you test it? Because I couldn't get to the map. It was a completely different address. So I appreciate the letter coming out, I really do. And I don't mean to beat anybody up, but let's test it before we send the letter out. So thank you for your time, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's never happened before. I'm impressed with you people. Brian.
Thank you. My name is Brian Weinstein. I live at 285 Southeast Bush Street. When I was in PPC, sitting up there back in 2003, I always reviewed our code when it came to proposals that we were considering. So I'd like to do the same here and take this up a level where we ought to be looking at it. Section 18.01.030, purpose and intent of the land use code. 3, facilitating the adequate provision of transportation, water, sewerage, schools, parks, and other public facilities and services through the orderly application of these regulations designed to guide future growth and development. So schools, check. But then there's this part, a bit more encompassing and a lot more broad. Section D, require environmental excellence by 1, establishing and implementing measures to preserve Issaquah's unique natural beauty. 2, preventing degradation of the environment. 3, using Issaquah's natural resources responsibly. 4, requiring that environmental impacts are properly mitigated despite the pressures of growth. 5, recognizing man-made constraints. And 6, preserving environmentally critical areas. Issaquah residents have made it abundantly clear via this language that our treed, forested hillsides are a treasure that needs to be preserved. It's a measure of environmental excellence. We also appreciate and love our schools. We vote for permanent taxes, a $500 million that's billion with a B, dollars, to sustain them during their continued growth. That growth, however, needs to be balanced with environmental excellence. This proposal, as nice as it seems, to have urban schools and government buildings, frankly, when were we citizens asked if we wanted to live in an urban community? This change strikes at the very heart of what we think of Issaquah, rural, urban, or something in between. I have chickens that walk down my street and reports of bears in the neighborhood on a weekly basis. And the Issaquah School District and this proposal tell us that now I suddenly live in an urban area. I'm from Los Angeles, California. I know what an urban area is. This amendment is not representative of our code, our city, our values, and the message to the school district and any other business or developers, the applicant, should be, you need to do better. You need to comply with the rules of the town in which you operate. If you can't comply with our rules, change your operating procedures or go elsewhere. Read this proposal carefully. Saying that something will be efficient when it is reduced, minimized, or taken away is a clever use of language, but in this case, it's wrong. We shouldn't change our values because they are contradictory to how the applicant chooses to operate. The Issaquah School District, with $500 million of bonds money at its disposal, and our city administration must do better. Thank you.
Mr. Kapler, you're next.
David Kapler, 255 Southeast Andrews Street. You received a lot of correspondence from Connie Marsh. I happen to agree with her analysis and opinions. We've been told several times tonight this isn't a rezone. It's not a rezone technically because it's still CFF-F, but the criteria for the zone are dramatically being changed. So property is being rezoned. Whether it still has the same letter combination on it, it is definitely a change in its potential use, and it is a rezone. I'm concerned about the county parcels, which is not exactly what you're dealing with tonight, but there is some suggestion about where CFF should be up there and where CFO, open space, should be, and where the other more commercial is. I think the map and so far the discussion on that is very weak and doesn't understand the land. I've been on that land many times. There's wetlands on it. There were springs and creeks on it before it blew out, the Camp Creek, and there again. It's had a long history. Clayton Springs didn't happen because of infiltration from Microsoft. Those Clayton Springs were there before. It's a complicated situation. The forest up there is questionable in terms of its health, as the water table and water has been changed by excavation to the east and we got to make sure that forest will be healthy as we infringe upon it and the remaining trees stay there. That's the most important backdrop we have in the lower valley, and we need to keep those trees in good shape. We're adopting, well, right now we have a moratorium because the Central Issaquah plan isn't working. So I would suggest that there's written language in the Central Issaquah plan that's not working, but here we're going to take that language and just adopt it for this. I think that's wrong. To be taking language which we have concerns about, we have a moratorium, a huge impact on people by that moratorium, but we're saying the language is good enough to incorporate it on this. I think that's a big mistake. City buildings, that's a whole nother story, and if we can leave that out, that must probably be good for now. There is a lot of talk about different parcels and different things that could happen with city buildings, and the frustration the city has with the campuses being spread out, with planning and public works being on the other side of town, and there's a lot of interest in trying to consolidate and do something more substantial. The confidence I have in the Issaquah School District as an academic institution is extremely high. My confidence level in them as a builder of schools and impacting communities is very low. And that's a major concern I have. And this could facilitate even more impacts and disregard for communities. Thank you.
You don't have to do that after every time. Steve? No, I appreciate it. Steve?
Hi, Steve Pereira, 170 Northeast Dogwood Street, about 9.5 years ago when I moved here. First of all, thanks to all of you for being here instead of at the gas station and blues concert that's going on tonight. Thanks to Keith for another night, and to all city staff for another night dedicated to city business. Thank you. So kind of setting in context, when I bought here 9.5 years ago, I didn't have any kids, but I really liked that the community supported kids and supported school districts. I was one of those who kind of cringed at a more than $500 million bond, but was glad to see it passed. So I'm making some distinction, though, here between whether or not the Issaquah School District should also have to abide by those same standards or should be allowed to build outside of areas. And I don't think we should. I don't think the municipal building should be able to build either. I would also add that I think this was poorly communicated. While 3,000 letters is a lot, I think this is a broader issue than just those that live within 300 feet of a currently zoned CFF property. I think it would have been good for the school board to take up the issue, as Member Walsh suggested. Is this a broader topic that we should look at? Not do we want urban schools or does the community want urban schools, but can we cite those and on properties that are currently zoned for them? This procedure talks about placing urban development in places where we didn't plan to have urban development. So it is effectively, as Dave Kapler suggested, it is a rezone in fact, if not in the letters of the code. There were some specifics in the code that talked about having, instead of, I think, a green coverage, just have a green kind of hiding area. I forget what the terminology is. That doesn't seem to be what Issaquah says is important. We want trees, we want non-permeable surfaces. So this code language doesn't get us to the place that we want to be as a city, as a valid community. I think it's great to say to our school kids, let's preserve the environment, let's build on acreage that doesn't need to be terraformed to meet those needs. For all those reasons, for the reasons David Kaplan mentioned, for the reasons that Connie Marsh has already communicated, this seems like a bad idea to put zoning or put construction in places where we didn't vision to be urban centers. So please vote no. And again, thanks to you all.
Karen?
My name is Karen Lee. I live in Sammamish, although I was an Issaquah resident for many years. And excuse me, I think that this is a really important issue. All the factors that are being brought forth, including the zero setback, the 90% impervious or impervious surface or whatever.
Right.
I'm getting flustered because I don't like public speaking. But I think that even though the Issaquah Press is no longer here, I think that there should be more publicity about this in the other community newspapers. I think there should be more community input and chance for more people to speak. So I think that you should open this up more to more of the citizens and give them a chance to give their feedback too. It may be more hearings and more public speaking like this. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak this evening?
No pizza? I don't believe it.
My name is Emily Freet. I live at 205 Newport Way Northwest in Issaquah, and I have children in the Issaquah School District, and I work for the Issaquah School District. And I'm against this proposed amendment. I'm against this proposed amendment, not for anything unique that you haven't already heard tonight, but I'd like to state my opinion anyway for the record. The proposal to apply the CIP to areas and properties beyond Central Issaquah is short-sighted and extreme. We must keep our trees and protect the forested slope and hilly forested green spaces. Proper planning entails building on or redeveloping land that is already available or not overly challenged by steep slopes, wetlands, and questionable soils. This is standard. The standard must be applied to all development, including schools and other community facilities. As a community, Issaquah values our trees and our treed hillsides, and they must be protected. Furthermore, the Issaquah School District should work within and embrace the existing land use codes that represent good land stewardship and environmental excellence. So I am obviously opposed to this. And I encourage everybody to take a step back and look more diligently at how we can reach our common goals. I work for the school district. I'm in the schools every single day. My children go to the schools here, and I know about the crowding. We need schools. This isn't a schools versus trees. This is about smart, intentional development that reflects our community values. Thank you.
Mary.
My name is Mary Lynch, and I reside at 2690 Northwest Oakcrest Drive, Issaquah. I sent you a letter, and I'm going to resend it because I did notice that there was a typo in that. And I do concur or support what Connie said and David and the others tonight. I do want to also mention that I did serve on the Central Area Citizens Task Force, I think 2010, 2013, during which time I spoke up constantly of the fact that the city needed to work more closely with the school district. It wasn't until almost a year ago that they did finally sit down and work more closely with them. But during those times, what we came up with as a task force was some representative urban schools that other countries and cities are doing across the country, and that was to locate them in the central area where we have the density, to go higher with them, to even look at having schools that might have affordable housing that teachers could live in, either above or adjacent to them, to work with the city to have playgrounds for their elementaries that might also, during non-hours, become more usable community spaces, because we don't really fully utilize our parks today that we have here. Those were all part of our discussions that we gave forward to city staff, hoping that we would build codes and design standards around that. That did not happen. That's one of the reasons why we have the moratorium. The codes are not correct. This code amendments that you see tonight, as other people have said, are for all the parcels of land. And I and many of us could not even identify what all those parcels are. You said you sent them out to 3,000. How do we even know that was accurate? So until you know what all the parcels are being impacted, how can you make an educated, real judgment? I don't know. How can, without informing the people that are going to be affected this, can you make changes to it that actually lessens the amount of zoning and requirements on there? We already know that the tree canopy that the city has no real tree canopy code. The last study was done in 2006, and that was a guesstimate. So the codes are not there, so we know what a tree canopy is. We don't have any really clear standards that protect trees. We say we put money into a tree fund, but there's no accountability that I found that, number one, how much money goes into that and what comes out of that tree fund and where those are planted and how it really affects the tree canopy. I hear we're supposed to have a study sometime this year. I've not seen it, but I've not seen anything in the revised codes for the Central Area Plan that says that we're going to get any revised codes or any stiffening of requirements for that. I also want to say that I really think that the schools should be located in the urban areas or in the central area plan, and to put schools and change the schools in zones like for Issaquah Valley. That's a residential neighborhood that abuts to Issaquah Creek, and to change the codes for that, you're not only changing a total neighborhood environment, we've just spent how many millions on a bridge to get to the other side of the creek. And I was down there just yesterday looking, and there were people playing on the other side that I could almost touch from where I was standing on the blacktop at Issaquah Valley. So if you're going to say that you can go within the 90% impervious surface, and you're going to allow them all these variations, or not variations now, they're going to be 2 allowable codes, where is the real public review of this? Because I know I was part of the Issaquah Middle when Clark went in there, and we had to go to 2 or 3 development meetings and had to have large audience comments talk to try and get some of the things that we got, to get the sidewalks that we had up Rainier, to get the wall, which I wish would have been a sound-absorbing wall, but just a concrete wall to protect those neighbors that are along Front Street from the new noise that's going to come from Clark. But that shouldn't have had to. Those people in the community shouldn't have had to come and fight to get protection from noise and from that. That should have been an established code. So what I would like to see is, if nothing else, a little bit tightening of the codes when it comes to schools and other municipal buildings, that they have to play the same game to protect our environment and what we stand for. Or we're going to end up with solid concrete throughout not only the central area plan, but if these codes go forward, we can redo any public land to whatever we want on this code. So it can have the 65-foot buildings, it can have the 90% impervious surface, and 0 lot lines. And that's not right. So you need to look at what the code is, you need to figure out what it's going to impact, and I would say also, you know, stop, listen, and get the moratorium and the new codes in place before you change this.
Does anybody else have any comments?
I have one. Can I go twice?
Okay.
For the record, I'm Jake Cooper, Chief Financial and Operating Officer for the school district. What I just heard is, that's why I believe I'm professionally frustrated currently. You don't want us to redevelop, you don't want us to develop. We have a federal and state obligation to educate your children and house them in schools. So what should we do? Where should we house them? I heard to go somewhere else. I don't know where that somewhere else is. We've been looking for property for as long as I've worked for the system. We've had a real estate agent working for us for 30 years. I've sat down with every type of municipality, real estate folks, builders, developers. There is not flat, graded ground ready for a school to be sited on. So I want you all to think about that very carefully. We do not propose this or work with the city staff lightly, but it is a smart use of taxpayer money to redevelop existing property that you have, so you don't have to expend up to $2 million per acre. And then secondarily, if we have to buy less acreage for each school site, that also saves the taxpayers a significant amount of money, which I didn't hear anybody talk about taxpayer savings, but as a CFO, I take that very seriously. And that's why we have the highest bond rating in the state and a higher bond rating in the federal government on the Moody side, and 15 clean consecutive state audits. So I take a fiduciary responsibility very seriously, both on land acquisition and construction. I also like to point out we have an excellent track record of construction and building, lower square footage costs than any of our neighbors. And so there may be some low confidence levels. I don't know why. Our projects open on time and for the most part on budget unless we change the scope or codes require us to add scope to a project. So that's my closing from my administrative standpoint. The parcels of land that some suggest exist, they don't. Those are unicorns and leprechauns that we're chasing. So I want to be very clear that we have done an exhaustive search for a long and lengthy period of time. There are no good solutions or easy solutions, and that's why we're here tonight. And so that's all I have.
Before you go, could you maybe look quickly at this map and some of the real hotspot parcels, I think, that people are picturing. Maybe they aren't something that would even be ideal for a school. Is there a way to kind of narrow this down and say, not that you've done a full study of every one of these, I don't expect that, but.
So the tricky part for us is that my board members failed to mention that we have 2 eminent domain proceedings going on right now. So we've exercised our option under state law to condemn property. So we have a condemnation here, proceeding that currently has a stay on it for the Providence Heights. There's 40 acres there where we had planned to house both an elementary and a high school. So densely developed, 1 parcel, 2 sites, wise land use, though densely developed. We also have eminent domain on an office building located adjacent to Home Depot, Costco, Siemens, or better. And the plan there would be then to demolish our current administration building and redevelop that site with a 6th middle school potentially. Because again, unfortunately, the only property that we may be able to close on in the near future is the one we actually currently own and redevelop. And other than that, obviously it's become public that we are seeking to potentially acquire property on the upper area from the city on the Highlands Bench, adjacent to Swedish for another elementary school. Also adjacent to one of the most densely developed pieces of property in the whole state of Washington, which I hope people that are pro-urban development will recognize that that is a great place to site a school, though it may come at the cost of a few acres of trees. There are trade-offs when it comes to development, so that's where I'm at. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. So that property is outside the urban growth area, and we are unable to site schools there. It's also locked up in a long-term land bank, right? Your Park Point piece, is that what you're talking about?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Permanent open space.
Yeah, permanent open space, and it's out.
It got moved outside the UGA.
Right. So remember, we are forced to site in the UGA, which means if you're in the UGA, it's considered urban. It's considered urban under the Growth Management Act. So though Issaquah is an ever-evolving community, under state law and zoning, it's considered an urban area. And so we can't site outside the growth management line or even adjacent.
Okay, well, you had property up in Preston.
John,
We could no longer site there as either.
Can we have this conversation on the side, please?
Well,
I won't
Last
take over
one.
your meeting.
last one. Answer that question.
Well, as long as I've been here, we didn't own any property in Preston.
That was the deal.
We all, as school districts, were given state sections of ground years ago when statehood occurred. Those sections have long been traded or sited schools on, and they no longer exist, so.
Okay, we're gonna, since there's no one else that wants to make a public comment, I'm gonna close this portion of the meeting and close the public comment and open it up to discussion by the commission. So if anybody would like to make a comment, clarification, suggestion, or have any clarification from staff.
Yeah, I would like to go ahead and suggest a question here to our commission members here. Seems like what's missing here is a urban school policy. And I think if we propose an urban school policy, or if a urban school policy was to be developed, it would probably mitigate a lot of confusion and help people articulate and set the expectations that I think a lot of people have questions about. And then you could actually take that policy and amend CFF to that. So we don't actually have to make a modification to CFF requirements or land use today, but we suggest that we have a policy created And then after the policy is created and there's consensus on it, then you could amend CFF with the policy.
I think I disagree. I think, and I think Keith can correct me on this too, but I believe the policy that that the staff is proposing for CFF is coming after conversation with the school district in terms of what the schools would require to build a more denser elementary school and middle school. So I believe that policy. I mean, the city doesn't build schools. The school district builds schools, and the school district said, "Hey, how about you do X, Y, and Z to make it easier for us?" And that's what the discussion here.
And this,
Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. This came as a question from, I believe it was you, about the policy base that this is coming from, and I listed you all back several. In land use, we talk about wanting to be in the leading edge of sustainability, which is compact buildings, using your land efficiently, less footprint, taller versus wider. We have things in the policies and goals in the parks element, in the economic vitality, about working with schools, making sure that we're partners on providing for schools, providing for parks. We have them in our services. I mean, we have policies all throughout talking about not only partnerships for the community, knowing what the community needs, providing for growth, providing for schools, loving that we have good schools, and being on the leading edge of sustainability. So the fact that there's not one policy calling out urban schools, the comp plan would be a lot larger if we were that specific on everything. But generally, we work with the schools, we provide for growth, we want to continue to be on the leading edge of sustainable development. And so in staff's mind, in the city's mind, we've got all those bases covered when we come to you wanting to use the land more efficiently for schools and government facilities.
Right, and I read through...
Or maybe just schools, we'd be fine with that too.
Yeah, I read through your answer here, and I understand there's lots of policies that...
There's at least 10.
Yeah, that roll up into it. But I'm also get a little gun shy in that we put the moratorium in place now because policy wasn't articulated clearly enough. And if we created a policy for urban schools, then we would articulate exactly what we need and what we want as a community. And then it would set the right expectations. So you don't have a collection of policies to support the schools. You have a school policy. So it's upper funnel. So create an upper funnel experience.
So I want to just throw something out there because the moratorium keeps getting bounced around. And, I think when you look at the moratorium work items, it's not about policy. It's about actually the tools to implement the policy. We're talking about architecture and urban design. We're actually talking about strategies for affordable housing. It's not about new policies. It's about actually putting the tools in place to achieve the policies that are in the plan. One of those 6 moratorium items was to relook at the visions. It wasn't about really to add new policies. It was about to kind of add more meat to the bones of that so that it was clearer what we expected to get. But really most of it, parking and, urban design and architecture and affordable housing, vertical mixed use, all of those are actually implementation tools of the plan. And this is an implementation of the policies that are up there now. I mean, when I read Assist Issaquah School District in Planning for Growth, I think that's what this is. Now you may say this isn't a good way to do that. And so maybe we need to pick a spade instead of a rake, but this is an implementation action for a policy that exists. I'm not disagreeing with you, Commissioner, if you think we should craft more policies related to kind of urban character of schools, that could be fine. I don't know that necessarily has to come before the suggested code revision that's at you guys for consideration this evening.
In your thinking of policy, are you talking about what the school needs? Are you jumping over the line from what we as a city can do and provide and help, and what the school district needs, because they know their children, they know what they need. So do you want a policy that implements both?
I think an overarching policy drafted by the school district and maybe a task force or some other body would help the school district get what they need as resources and communicate the expectations to the community. And I think creating a higher level upper funnel policy would help give direction and clarity to move forward, right? So
I don't see what you're driving at. I mean, the community passed a bond, so we want to build X number of schools. The community's already made the decision.
I'm not saying
if
that.
you're asking, okay, what's a particular elementary school going to look like, there will be a public process that will go through a level 3 review in terms of what that school looks like, what are the mitigation activities, what are they going to do for transportation, what are they going to do to shaping. All of that will happen. This doesn't prevent any of that. So I don't.
So why wouldn't we
see what
want to
you're driving
create
at.
a upper funnel policy?
What does an
help-
upper frontal policy mean?
All right, so,
I don't understand.
all right, sorry. What is an urban school?
I don't think we need to answer that question. An urban school is just a school that's a little bit denser than a not urban school. I mean,
Okay,
not
what is an- what does an
not to be
urban school
not to be
look like?
flippant, but all they're asking is instead of building a 1-story elementary school, I want to build a 2-story elementary school and have it be a little closer to the road. That's all that's happening. There's no profound philosophical shift in terms
So
of how we're building our schools going on
You
here.
are
I would
proposing.
disagree with that.
I would disagree with that as well. I'm sorry coming in late, but I think that's a gross overstatement of what's happening with this proposal.
So you see this as a fundamental rethink in terms of how we're building schools within.
It's a
the
fundamental
municipal-
rethink of how we're building our community related to how we're building schools. But when you start talking about changing impervious surfaces, tree retention, when you start actually changing the dynamic of what we set as a standard, then yeah, you're talking about something larger than just making that school taller. I think most people are in favor of the comment of let's go taller instead of wider. But Keith's comment about, rake versus spade is actually a really good analogy for what we're looking at right now. Maybe we should be going a little more spade, even a middle ground, maybe a shovel, but this is a pretty large rake to be applying to a pretty large breadth of code. So I would disagree with your
And
statement.
what we decide today would affect all CFF parcels.
And municipalities too, it's not just schools.
So
I think before we spend more time in your funnel, can we go ahead and I think everyone on the commission, and someone chime in if you agree, I think everyone in the commission would be okay to limit this just to schools, because I think as the staff has said, there's no need for municipality and the staff is open to being only schools. So can we go ahead and close off that part of the conversation? Does anyone object to it limited just to schools?
We have to vote on that, so.
For
you
sure, yeah,
wanna-
but can we go ahead and maybe have that part of the conversation so we don't get distracted by the non-school issues?
If you
Limit
would
it to
like
just
to make a
schools.
motion?
Yeah, can I make a motion that we amend this so that it would be limited just to schools on CFF?
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? It's typical that you have to do. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, so a lot of you have a few answers from us that we are just discussing schools, not municipal buildings on any of these properties. Here, I mean, we just recommend to the council, so I don't know what they're going to do, but from right here, you can see that we agree that that's not going to be a part of it.
Okay,
So,
thanks.
going
I just thought
back-
that would help narrow the conversation.
Oh, I was going to get there, but you were
Sure.
talking. So continue your conversation about what's going on with this particular code amendment for the schools. I know you had some comments.
So I was going to break this down into 3 sections. The first of which is that government idea or other government sites. So we've covered that. I think the other 2 approaches that we need to take is, does this idea of urban schools need more community input before we set the code in place on this? That would be the first thing. And then the second thing is, if we disagree with that idea and want to approach these code changes can we maybe look at them individually? Because, as you said, maybe we're okay with height, but maybe we don't want to look at impervious. So I would want to orient the conversation in those two ways.
And I would add on to that, because I agree with those things, also talking about the areas, specifically the CFF plots that this applies to, because I don't think that what we're talking about for schools should apply to some areas that are already CFF. Is that?
I think we just said that with the not applying to other government sites.
Well, that's saying the government facilities can't go on all of these sites. You know, these
Right.
standards that we're talking about dialing in
What?
would not apply to those. What
Yeah,
I'm
'cause-
talking about is narrowing, there's all these CFF plots, all that green, you know. I think we
Jennifer,
should
could you toggle back to the map, please?
concentrate that to the areas where we want to see these types of schools.
Oh, you're saying basically between the central Issaquah area versus all of Issaquah within the growth boundary?
Right.
Okay. So that could be another part of a conversation.
I think I'll go back because I was surprised how sharply you guys disagree with me. I really don't see this as a major change. Putting aside maybe the permeability, but I don't think, so I think there may be some discussion on whether or not it was going from 50 to 90%. I could see how that's a pretty material change. But I don't really see some of the height restrictions and the setbacks as being some wild rethink of how the school wants, how the community wants development to be built.
May I ask you
across.
why you think that why do you say put that aside?
I know that's because as I listen to your comments, I think maybe there could be a discussion about permeable surface, but I think the other ones around heights and setbacks, these school buildings really aren't that much. They're still not going to be any larger than.
So let's talk
single-family home.
setbacks.
Sure.
Because if I look at Grand Ridge Elementary, the difference between saying you can't build within 10 or 20 feet of your property edge versus you have to build at 10 feet in order to use that full scope of the site. Grand Ridge Elementary, the building there is built back, and I'm horrible at estimating, but I would say at least 50 feet, something like that. So the idea of a school building coming up to that edge, I think is a fundamental difference in how our schools are currently set up.
And you'll have to apologize the fact that I missed the beginning of this meeting, but was safety addressed as far as, I mean, there's a reason for setbacks, especially when you think about how our children are offloading and onloading. I mean, it's kind of a zoo. If anyone's ever been at pick up and drop off at a school, did the city specifically address in their presentation how these setbacks would affect?
I think the Issaquah,
how we move in and out?
I think the Issaquah School District staff that presented spoke specifically about, or they talked a lot about how that's a factor.
Having no impact.
But they didn't
No.
assure
I'm sorry,
that.
that's definitely a consideration. They want to build safe schools. I
Well,
mean,
obviously, but
Yeah.
how does this change of setback affect that? I assume a study's been done. I assume that they can tell me undeniably this does not affect safety, right? Did they do that?
they're the ones that came up with the setbacks.
So if.
No change, right? That's what I want to hear, is that there's no change with the setbacks that would threaten safety in any way.
So I'm going to answer it a little bit differently, Joy. So Grand Ridge Elementary, when the school district, so Grand Ridge Elementary, and I don't remember, Steve, what year you guys built that, but I'm just going to go ahead and tell the story since I was in the room. So the school district came, and it was a normal school at the time that they built that facility. And the school at that time was basically, the approach that the school district had was, we put the building at the far back end of the property, and we put the parking lot out front because everybody drives their kid to elementary school, okay? And so what we said was, that is not the approach for Issaquah Highlands and the city, and because we expect our parents, at least some of them, will want to walk their kids to school. And the conversation we had with the school district at that time, sorry, Steve, I'm going to throw you under the bus, is no, that's not going to happen. But we pushed really hard. And, you know, Lindsay, even though it may not be right at the sidewalk, that's why there's the bus shelter, and we got the bus drop-off right on Park Drive, because we wanted to engage the school with the community and not have it at the back of a big surface parking lot. We pushed really hard. I think it's a great outcome for vision for what we want our community to be. Now, okay, fast forward another 10 years and it's time to move the needle a little bit more. So I'm saying that because they are super concerned about safety. And they will not build a school that has permeability because they're worried about kidnappings. You know, you have parents that come and just take a kid and go. And so that issue is paramount to their concern. It's paramount to our concern as well. Moving the building, and frankly, I don't know if they proposed that setback or if that was city staff that actually stuck that in there. So I would say that, that may be something we might want the school district to come back and specifically address because it's their issue more than it is ours, even though children's safety is obviously a concern.
It's all of ours.
Exactly.
That's why that was one thing I was wondering is I'd like a firm, yes, this does not impact. We've done studies and we can show that this is not an issue and checked off the list rather than saying they're going to look at it. It's obviously going to be a factor later on down the road. I just was hoping that we had an answer. Right now I'm saying.
Have an answer for it? Lisa is the president of the school board.
Steve Crawford, Director of Capital Projects for the school district. There's a 0 to 20 foot build line in this currently. That's something that can be accommodated, and we will certainly build safe schools. Each one particular school, each site is going to be different. The building may be close to the property line. That doesn't mean that's necessarily where kids are coming in and out of the school. There are a lot of factors that will vary on each school, the pedestrian access, the availability of bus access, cars. Those are all safety concerns that are paramount to developing a safe site for kids. And the fact that it's a 0 to 20 on the front is going to work. There are other parameters that become defining elements in school siting. We have to have a fire lane around the building, so that's a 20-foot perimeter. If it's fronting on a street and it's 20 feet from the street becomes the fire lane, so there doesn't have to be a separate element in between. And so, this whole thing is basically to allow the potential to compact the footprints. The reality is we need to build schools. And we understand that we're being a lot more efficient. We're helping to preserve the integrity of Issaquah by building on smaller sites. We can put them closer to the neighborhoods. If we can build a school on 7 acres or 6 acres, there's a benefit to the whole community on not taking 10 acres. Start looking around. Where on the valley floor that's flat ground are you going to find 2 elementary sites, a middle school, and a high school site? Even if you compress the acreage, when you add the totals, it's a lot of land. So we're trying to be creative. We're trying to compact the footprints. We're trying to work in areas that need schools that don't require transporting kids long distances, that they can walk to school much more readily than would be the case if you put schools all on the flat valley floor and you're transporting kids from all around. The school district is 108 or 9 square miles. It's huge. But we have core areas of growth and we need to address those, and Issaquah happens to be one of those. But all of these allow for the possibility to develop what's been termed an urban school. But it's a school that can fit, as Jake said, in an area that's an urban area. The county has determined that. This place is changing. It's not the same as it was in the past. We're pushing 20,000 kids in the school district. I started working here, it was under 9,000. And we're growing 500 plus kids a year.
I'm going to stop you. It was a question that was asked, and we usually, if there was a question that the commissioner asked, or if there's a problem, and It is kind of an unusual situation to have somebody who is actually a school district representative to actually answer the question, then having to go to staff and then have staff go to the school district. So this is an issue that we're all concerned with, and if I can get an answer now before I have to vote on this, I'm going to do it any way I can. So is it normal? No, but this isn't normal. So is there any other questions that you guys have? I know that there was the 90% is still an issue.
Yeah,
for
I'd like to
some.
go through maybe each of those and discuss people's concerns, because I think we've said maybe that there are some things that aren't as much of a concern, and there's others that may be.
Okay,
So
is
could
there-
we get that up that talks about those differences?
Again, I apologize for not knowing the answer to this, but did the city or the school district address if we don't change impervious surfaces to 90%, let's say we do change building height, is there a way for this property to be used in a way that both satisfies some of the needs of the community as far as tree retention? Are we able to actually modify the code and be able to actually win both ways? Are we able to change, let's say, and go higher than 65 feet and be able to then not have changed the impervious surface of 90%? Is there wiggle room right now, or is after all of this comments that we received even prior to the meeting, is city still saying this is what we have to do, or is there another way? Is there a third option between 90 and 50, 65 and 30? I mean, is there another option on the table?
So which one do you want to address first? Building height or
Impervious surfaces at 90%.
So impervious surface, so let me say this. Impervious surface is truly a metric of drainage.
Yeah.
It really, to use impervious surface to say I want more trees is not the right connection point.
Smaller footprint, though, is...
So what we're talking about is as you reduce the parcel size, and what they're doing is they're taking their normal program, which they used to fit on 10 acres, and if they're now putting it on 7 or 6, the room that's left over so pervious allows for water to be infiltrated in that location, right? And so but you can accommodate, so let's assume, so right now the city has other code provisions associated with low impact development, which says basically the new NPDS rules say the first thing that you have to do is try to infiltrate on your property. So you can do that in underground vaults, right? So they could take the stormwater from the property, put it in a vault, and then have that be basically a bottomless vault so that it infiltrates underneath the parking lot or underneath the parking garage, if they build a parking garage here. And so using impervious as a way to get trees is not the right tool. If you want trees, say you want trees. Don't use pervious to try and get more trees, is I guess my point there.
Because looking at the page, the minimum tree density is unchanged by this amendment, correct?
Right.
Keith, I wouldn't put it as more trees. I'd put it as less asphalt.
Well, and so
when we're talking about lids is great for treating on site, but I had serious concerns about the 90%. And the swap going from 50 to 90. So when we talk about isolating areas and let's talk about impervious surfaces, my question to staff is, after receiving so much really powerful impact from the community about this, do you have is there a middle ground? Is the school district saying there's no way that we will do this without these conditions, and staff is backing that? Or is there some type of option on the board where we say, we can all win. We can actually not have 90s, 65. We can not have the proposed code, but we can change the existing code to make a harmony, is what my question is to staff.
So the answer is that we're here talking about this and trying to come up with proposed standards that make sense. If the commission wants to ratchet down the impervious level from what staff's recommendation is, then we deal with that the way we deal with that later, and so the way that plays out, it's like, for example, we had that conversation about structured parking. At the end of the day, the administration agreed with the commission's recommendation coming out of that, and so what went forward to the council for consideration was basically a unified position from the administration and commission. That's great when that happens. Doesn't have to happen that way. If, for example, the commission feels really strongly about the pervious impervious, what I would tell you before you kind of stick a flag in the ground on this is, you know, the Highlands has 100% impervious allowance. It doesn't mean that just because you allow that, that's what happens on the site. It means they could, right? And so part of what I heard you say, Commissioner, is, yeah, but if I give them 100% impervious, I don't want to be the result that it all ends up being a paved surface parking lot, right? Because that seems like that's a bad outcome for the community to allow that, but then get something that was unintended. So part of, I guess, if that's the concern, then let's talk about how we don't have that happen. And there might be some ideas to get that taken care of without necessarily, I'm going to say watering down the impervious level, but, you know, basically moving that from 90. I do believe that when you're talking about a more urban site plan, and, you know, it's hard because we don't necessarily have any specific sites we're talking about, so it's hard to use it, because I want to give an example and say, okay, on this particular site, if they end up only buying this much land and the rest of it, which right now might be undeveloped or might be a residential, maybe a couple single-family homes, well, now if those can stay single-family homes and the school gets a lot smaller, well, from an overall pervious-impervious perspective, maybe you're getting to that same spot, but just in a different way because the school's taking down less. That's the thing that, you know, that's what we need to talk about is, you know, how does it really play out at the end of the day?
Because I think that's a great thing to keep in mind is the financial impact on the school district, and that for every % of permeable land that you require, that's just more land the school has to go and purchase. Because assuming that you've maximized your building height, you've built structured parking.
I think the other thing,
the school district needs to buy even more land in order to hit a particular permeable threshold or impermeable threshold.
I think the other thing to consider is in the school district's letter, how, I think it was that in our packet, how they talked about the turf, the fact that if they put out turf, then that becomes impervious. So it's not necessarily parking lots.
Yeah, 'cause if
Maybe
you have
green space that's
green
not.
thumb.
If you have like a playground that has like gravel or whatever, that's still treated as impervious.
It most
correct?
certainly is, yes.
Yeah.
Whereas I think most people would still consider that open space from an aesthetic standpoint. It's impermeable from a drainage standpoint.
I personally disagree with that, but that's not the point.
So I understand that everybody here seems to have a different flavor of what they think should be in this proposal. That's why I think a policy, an overarching policy, is so important, because it'll help us iron out all the differences that we have. Think of all the differences that would be out there in the community. And it would help it would give clarity to the school district, and they would have a voice in what they need. And I think the ultimate benefit to this would optimize the ultimate solution, right? So they have a set of things that they need in this plan, and we're looking at this and we can't even agree on 90% impervious versus the setbacks. Then you have tree density. There's too many factors in this. A policy would help set the vision, and then the code would come in to back it up. We don't have that, so we don't even know what the vision is.
I still think I disagree. I think what myself, Lindsay, and Joyce are arguing about are the particular metrics and the tools that we want to use. I think the overarching policies, they're intentionally vague because they don't go and they don't specify percentage of permeable. I think the policies are there.
I always say this to you, Ron. I really appreciate your approach. I agree, it's a little cart before the horse, but unfortunately, we are not in a situation to be able to kick it back to staff and say, let's see what you do in 6 months. I would love, because we have an obligation to the community to move forward. So even if we make a decision that says this isn't the right thing and we don't want to move forward, that's a stronger statement than saying, we need to have more large-scale policy in place, because we always talk about the teeth is in the code. We have the opportunity to give the teeth. If we think that this isn't the right way to manage the community, then this is our chance to tell staff and to tell council that. But to delay, and to me is more of a fallback, I get the impulse to say we want more of our ducks in a row, cart before the horse. I love the passion, but I don't know that that's really a realistic option for us.
So, all right, let's look at it from a time standpoint. When we purchase this King County Island, they can assign it to whatever land use code that they want, CFF, right? So they're a long ways
Concur
away
with that,
from.
Keith? Do you mind? I just want to make sure, Keith, you concur with that? That any code can be assigned to the annexed?
So that's part of the public conversation. So the property that we own, that we're annexing, we will propose whatever zoning. We could propose residential zoning on that property if we wanted to. So this is why it's part of a public conversation, is what should that zoning be and why? And that's what's starting next week on Monday, right? But that's not this conversation.
Right. This conversation has no impact on that island. So from a time standpoint, I was trying to separate the two. So and the school district doesn't have a school to build today. So if we kick this back to Land and Shore and say, help us put together a vision, a policy for urban schools, we're not delaying anything.
Yes, you are.
Yes, you are.
They cannot go out into the community and spend time, resources to find property. They can't do that until they know what they are allowed to build and where they can put it.
So what property are we currently buying today, aside from the parcels that we are currently in a stage of acquisition?
I think,
if we delay
Ron, I
this
think
and
what
set
you're
a
asking for
policy-
is you want to see evidence that making action on CFF now would facilitate specific action by the school district in the short term. Is that what you're asking?
No. What I'm saying is, if we
What are
leave
you saying?
CFF code the way it is today,
Yeah,
it affects nothing within the near future.
that's the same thing that I just said.
So if we want a vision to help us iron out what we want as a community in our schools, that's smart, right? Because we have a collection of mishmash policies putting together, and we don't even know what that looks like. So why wouldn't we want to have a policy?
We do. So
A table of contents.
We do. We wanted, I mean, this is one thing that I think all of us came across when we looked at our packet. What's an urban school? What does Issaquah say that we want our schools to look like? So what I think that what we should do is put a proposal to staff to say, we'd like to request that we meet with Land and Shore, that we form this policy, but that's a separate discussion from what we're doing today, and asking to have more clarity in the code. And Trish specifically addressed, if we had these for every code, our code would be even longer. If we had this as policy statements, it would be even longer. But if this is something that you feel is a priority, then staff can do that. So what we request is that this discussion of forming that policy and having that continues to move forward. It just can't, I don't know that I agree that it should delay our decision about this tonight.
No, I'm not saying delay the decision tonight about CFF. We can vote on that. What I'm saying, though, is before we think about that, we should probably create a recommendation to City Council or Land and Shore to come up with a policy, help us design.
That's just what she
Hang
said.
on.
Yeah, I like the way Joyce said it. So how about we?
Yeah, let me finish. Let me finish.
Please.
So that gives us, we need a policy.
I like that. I agree with your statement. I agree that we need actual policy to help guide both the school district and the city to be able to say what do schools look like, what do urban schools look like. I agree with that statement.
So we can we could do two things tonight. We can vote on this, the CFF, and propose a recommendation to Land and Shore and or City Council to create a urban school policy.
Okay, I motion that the commission sends a request to staff to, I would say, rather than a policy around urban school, I'd say maybe to define what the city's vision is on urban school.
Define and create a living and changeable document.
Yep. But just to put to put a little more substance and definition around urban school.
I would second that.
Okay, more discussion on that particular, what is it exactly are you looking for?
I think there needs to be a community conversation between community members, the school district, and the city on what the joint definition is of an urban school and whether that is appropriate for all areas of Issaquah.
Don't you think that that has already occurred or is
No.
in the process? They have.
I think it's in process, and
It's
then
in
we're asking
process
for
of doing that already. So I don't know the value of requesting them doing something that they're already doing.
So then that would be at the decision of Land and Shore, because what we do is just a recommendation.
That's true.
So if we set the recommendation to Land and Shore in our city council, then they
can always ignore
So
it.
I watched
always-
the
they
Land and
can-
Shore conversation the other day that was talking about this annexation, and they had the same questions about what is an urban school? Have we discussed that before? And so I believe there is a need for a community conversation.
I do too, especially, I watched the Land and Shore too, and I was surprised. Land and Shore was given a different document that we were, from the superintendent. I don't have it in front of me, the dates. They had a huge list of conditions that were not changeable for what they needed to have conditions on the site. And I think that some of those things would actually draw a sharp contrast in the community. And so by having a policy in place would help guide our school district to be able to say what we do and do not want for this very fundamental thing. So it was actually from that letter that was provided to Land and Shore, I believe it was from the superintendent, was very specific about what they considered to be non-negotiable for what they needed, pretty blanket statements as well. So I think by having something in place, we're able to communicate to the school district, this is what we think is appropriate, rather than it being a little more vague as it is right now.
So just
So there's
clarity. Can I
there's a motion on the floor. And would you restate your motion?
Joyce, I think you can articulate better than I can.
I motion, and now you'll have, wait, before I motion, I believe our motion is to the city and not to Land and Shore, or is it actually that we need council to designate a work session? Who is the motion supposed to be?
I would, Land and Shore is the city council, so it's
Well, no,
one
the
and
question
same.
is,
Does it actually go to staff?
Yeah, do
I
we want
mean,
the
because
council to want
it's a
staff to
public
do it?
discussion. It's not necessarily, a form of the discussion can happen in commissions. It may also be happening in public hearings. It may be happening in other venues as well. So what I'd like to see is who do I direct this to? And is it staff or is it council?
So I guess it depends on what it is. So if it's a trailer for either for a recommendation tonight, then you add it onto your recommendation. If the commission is not going to make a recommendation because they think that this other thing needs to happen, then your recommendation is to basically not take action on the proposed code amendment until that happens, right? So it depends on what you want to do.
I'm personally against the last one. That is not what I think we need to do. What I think that we want to do is add a motion that says that as a commission, we would like to have further discussion and to have a living document created that specifies out the definition and the details of what an urban school is, what that looks like in different areas.
How about a recommendation?
Okay, yeah.
To proceed with this, which will be sent to, I would assume it would be sent to
Land and Shore and City Council.
the city council. It would be the city council.
Yeah.
They would be making the decision.
Ron, does this help satisfy some of what your point is?
Yeah, no,
So-
exactly what you said, I think is exactly what needs to happen.
Okay, but we are still going to vote on what is going on
Yes.
tonight. So
Yes.
let's clear this off of the table here.
Yes.
So we have a motion and
I'll second.
there's this 2 seconds, so it's going.
Fantastic.
And no further discussion, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. that we are going to proceed to recommend to the city council that there be further discussion on, with the school district and the community, to make sure that the school district knows what the community wants in their schools based on what the
Well, I think we're trying to
city,
define,
what the
define
school
urban
district
school
needs
specifically.
to. So the discussion will follow.
right.
Now, let's go back to this
Yes, thank
tonight's
you.
thing. Is there still questions about, and I think the height is determined by the size of the property. I mean, they're going to build schools for 500 kids, and so you're going to have to either go up or have to buy a lot of land, which is out of the question at this point in time. So the height doesn't affect us.
Well, are we able to increase the height, Keith? Are we?
So right now, I believe that the height factor is somewhat elevator driven. So you can do 3 stories in an auditorium without an elevator. You go higher than that,
You
then
need
it
an
becomes elevators, right?
And you can, 65
now-
is enough for 3 stories? More than enough?
Yes, oh
Okay.
yeah.
So right now, 65 feet is
They can do,
sufficient.
they could probably do 4 stories with 65 feet and an
Okay, so
auditorium if they
Is there a
wanted.
problem with the 65 feet?
No.
Okay, the other thing is the setbacks. You only have so much land, so you have a minimum amount of setbacks. Understanding that the schools are going to go out and design a property that offers safety for the kids, where the buses go. Everything is going to be a community-based decision at that point in time. So are you happy with the possibility of those small setbacks? Not that they're going to be there, they could be bigger, it all
So
depends.
one thing that you guys heard is, and again, I think this one of all the things we're talking about, this one's probably the least concerning for me personally. So you heard the school district say they put a fire lane around the building, right? And fire lane's 20 feet. So even though right now it's saying 7-foot side yard, 7-foot rear, that isn't going to happen, right? So if the commission has concerns about the lack of yard depth and you wanted to increase that to 20, I don't know that that would cause a problem for them, and I'm not sure it would cause a problem for the administration.
Sounds
So-
like a win-win then.
Well, if it's automatic that they need a 20-foot, why are we saying
Yeah.
7-foot? Why not put the 20-foot
Because the 20
there?
foot, as they said, could come in the form of a street.
It could. I mean, if they ended up with a corner parcel, you're right. I mean, so the front would be one street frontage, and then you'd count the other as a side yard.
And you wouldn't want a 20-foot grassy buffer between a street. You don't need that for security purposes. That would just be a
So
pure.
my concern with that
line
is
setback.
the designation of the build to line to say that they have to build at 20 feet. So is
So
there,
the concept between the build to and the setback, right?
Yeah.
So build to means it has to be within that parameters, whereas a setback means it's a minimum, right? And so, if you have, so the old way of doing business, it was like, okay, your setback was 10 or 20 feet, but that wouldn't preclude a property owner from putting the building 50 feet or 200 feet back, right? And so part of kind of getting more precise with how things are is the build to is a much more precise measure, because now we know it's going to be within that 20 feet. It might be at 20 feet, but it's not going to be at 50 feet or 100 feet or 200 feet back, right? So it's just a different way of doing it. And generally speaking, as we've gotten to be more cognizant of how we want buildings to sit on property, we've gone to build twos instead of setbacks, because the setback leaves it up to the property owner. Build to puts it in our hands in terms of prescribing where that's going to go.
What about for a large parcel? I mean, you're going to designate one as your frontage. That doesn't necessarily, like building up to 20 feet on Providence Point, for example, which is CFF, right? Doesn't
Not-
really make.
not yet.
Not yet.
Oh, it's not. Okay, I thought I saw it as green on the map, so.
So part of this is, and this gets back to the comment I made earlier about Grand Ridge Elementary. So if you want people to walk to the school, it's got to be near the street, right? The farther back you put it, You stick it behind a parking lot, you know, you're sending the message, this is a place to drive to, right? And so there's a conversation about that. I personally believe, you know, that it should be somewhat close to the street. You know, is 20 feet the right number? You know, I don't know.
So at what point do those numbers really get dialed in? Because we're obviously not educated enough to make those analysis and determinations, but we're being asked to vote on the proposed code.
Yes, you are. So, you know, if we're talking about really that front build to line, you know, and I don't know, maybe ISD, do you know, Steve, what the building setback is for Grand Ridge Elementary?
Because, yeah, they said 0 to 10.
I know, that was just.
I don't know specifically how far the building is back, but the bus shelter structure is probably right on the line.
Well, yeah, the bus shelter's right at the right of way. So, you know, but you're right. And then we made them put doors in, but they're locked. So, you know, so there's a give and take, you know, but you try and get, you want to promote walkability to the school.
Agreed.
And putting it too far back is going to be a discouragement for some folks.
I think that that point is going to show up in this policy that we've recommend, you know, wherever that goes from here. But I guess voting on these, I feel like we're voting on these numbers without agreeing that they're necessarily correct.
Or
Not
knowing
gonna
how
spend the
much
time to-
adjustment there is, knowing which
Right.
ones are essential, which ones are not as
right,
much.
this is what my question was earlier. Where is there any wiggle room? Is it, if it's not these numbers, then it's the end, it's, you know, it's death to possibility? Or is there, by saying, I think the community's got concerns, I've got concerns, can we find a middle ground?
So I guess what I would say is, you know, there could be situations where, let's say that, you know, they buy a piece of property and the street frontage is actually a critical area, like a wetland, right? So we would not make them put the building in the wetland. There will be allowances for, you know, variances, and I don't want to use the word variances because it's not technically a variance. It will be adjustment of standards based on site conditions, right? So if they buy a piece of property and it does not make sense to put the building at 20 feet for whatever reason, they're going to ask us to deviate from that. One of the reasons why we're proposing these changes now anyway is because every school comes in and asks for a deviation. You know, the first bullet on one of those slides was the existing code doesn't work now. And it puts staff in a really awkward space because we're being asked to bend almost all the rules. If we adopt these, the request for changes and adjustment of standards will be significantly less. And that's a win for the administration, frankly, and the school district, because it's one less administrative hurdle that they have to go through.
So what's the best way that we can vote tonight because we all agree that we want to move forward and we want to open up opportunities for the Issaquah School District to look at some of these parcels, right, and be able to move forward on that, but we don't necessarily agree on all the language in this code that we're voting on.
And we don't necessarily want to cement these things in as if they've been reviewed, because there's some of those things that just, I mean, those numbers don't necessarily mean anything to us because
Right.
we're not necessarily experts.
Right. So we can, again, kind of picking them apart. So the pervious, impervious, we have impervious standards that high in a lot of different places, sub-areas within the city. That's not actually very uncommon. It's uncommon for certain areas like up on Squawk or, you know, maybe South Cove, but they're not proposed. The likelihood that they would put a school in either of those locations is pretty small because it's not where their customer base is, frankly. So, you know, but the setbacks, I mean, I guess what I would say to you guys is, you know, we're not asking you to do anything you're uncomfortable with. If at the end of the day you want to basically say we don't have a way to gauge whether those are the right numbers or not, take a pass. I'd rather you guys pass than propose a standard that you picked out of a hat, right? Or threw a dart at a dartboard. So, you know, if some of these pieces of the puzzle you're comfortable with, then you can make that your recommendation to the council is, we're comfortable with building heights, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, we're comfortable with, I forgot what else is up there.
Yeah.
FARs, you know, so you can go through and cherry pick which standards you guys do want to make a recommendation on. And you may say, you know what, we're not engineers, we're not developers, we're not going to make a recommendation maybe on setbacks, because every parcel is going to be different. It's not just because you don't want to. I think you guys have demonstrated a rationale for where you may not be comfortable. And I don't think we have an absolute clarity on, you know, if it's 20 feet, it's great. If it's 30 feet, you know, oh my gosh, Armageddon, right?
Yeah.
Or, you know, so this is where I think you guys need to figure out what you're comfortable with. I don't think we're trying to push you past that. But hopefully we've provided you enough information to have that conversation.
So I have a couple of questions that I thought about in listening to our conversation here. And that is, what about charter schools, corporate schools, and nonprofit schools? Would they fall under the same set of standards, or is this strictly Issaquah Public School District on these lands? Because I don't want, see, what I'm thinking is, if you have a charter school come into Highlands or some of the other neighborhoods, Tallis, and decide they want to build out, and these are the requirements, they could go very big in a non-conforming way and it would upset the community, and yet it's a school, so they're locked in.
So right now, CFF is public ownership. So it has to be it could be Issaquah School District, it could be Bellevue College, it has to be a public institution.
Okay.
So the other one that I want to address is the trees and
Tree
retention, because that was where we got the most community
Absolutely.
comment before the meeting via emails and letters. So it seems like there is obviously, and I think this is coming in because of that property above the Highlands, which I walked earlier today, and I was amazed how many trees there are and how tall those trees are. So how do people feel about
I've got
that?
a problem with the tree retention being reduced to zero. I saw that as a big flag that to me is, especially with all the public comment that we got even prior to this meeting, I don't think that symbolizes what our community wants to see. If I were looking at this, I would start cherry picking, and I would start saying, I would keep the existing code on tree retention. I would keep the existing code on setbacks. I'm not trying to tell you where you need to put a school, but you're telling me that basically the school district comes in and says, we need a special exemption, and they get that all the time. And so I'm not sure why I need to make that part of the code, that they have blanket exceptions all the time on setbacks. So I'm for increasing the building height. I would even do more if you guys were like, hell, we don't mind putting in elevators. We want to see our need being met while being able to still satisfy the needs of the community. I don't think that it being more visible to more people in the area by having a trade-off of being able to have a smaller footprint is an issue from what I saw from the feedback that was given to us. So I'm for the building height, but I would keep the setbacks in the existing code, and I would keep the tree retention in the existing code. I don't see how 90% impervious surfaces is good for putting that into the code. Obviously, if they need that, the city's going to say you could, you're lid compliant. We don't mind. So they're already going to be getting these exemptions. Building it into the code is what I'm scared about. So. Again, I would say, okay, let's find a number. If that's 70% because you find that 50% is egregious and we can't work with that, then I can have some flexibility. But again, putting the tree retention down to 0%, putting the impervious surfaces up to 90%, these things concern me.
So would you be in agreement to retain the tree retention policy?
I would keep the existing code.
And allow for the landscape to go to Central Issaquah parameters, so that they don't have to have 20 feet of setback, they could have 5 feet of setback with a green wall instead of landscape terrains.
I don't mind a screening wall as the option for landscaping. I think that's fine, particularly when we're talking about structured parking, because we don't have landscape codes in place, so adding that in, yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with you 100%, and I think the throwing that in about the landscaping requirements, have it the Central Issaquah landscape requirements, the tree retention of the IMC, which is status quo,
Yep, no change.
no change there, and no change on setbacks. So that's what I'm hearing.
Well, and the
Basically,
other one, the one that seems incongruous with the density argument is also the impervious surface, because it could be used to increase the density of schools, but it doesn't
Okay, you're
necessarily.
uncomfortable with the 90%. Can you lower it to 75%? Would you be comfortable with 75%? In every instance when the school district comes in and says, I can't build the school because I need this and this and this, the city is going to find a way to create that extra 5 or 10% impervious surface. So are you comfortable with 75%? Okay, so if we limit
Keith
that to...
smiles.
I don't care, 75%. I go home tonight. So have we hit everything? The retention is the same, the density is the same.
You're saying, so setbacks are going to stay the same. Building height, we're agreeing to the 65 feet. We're changing impervious surface to 75%. We're keeping the existing code on tree retention.
Right.
So I would like to make a motion that we allow 65% or allow 65 feet in building height.
Yep.
We keep the setbacks, we keep the tree retention as is, and we implement the Central Issaquah landscape requirements. And what was the other thing that you mentioned?
The structured parking landscape is the other one up there, as well as the FARs and the level of review 3.
Oh, so it would include the FARs and the level 3.
So the structured parking landscape stays the same. It's in the, we keep it as a proposed.
Yes.
Correct, good.
Okay.
No, it requires rooftop screening.
And rooftop screening,
I
right.
suggest yeah. the new-
Rooftop screening, I think, is important because we have so
It's
many
in-
mountain
it's in the
views, you'll
proposal.
be looking down on it.
Yep.
So it
Yeah.
would be included.
It's in the proposal.
Okay, so,
And 75% impervious surface.
Correct.
okay,
Okay.
so that is your motion?
There's my motion.
Basically, we're leaving everything the same except the 75%.
And the tree retention and the
And the
setbacks.
setbacks.
Oh, I thought he
We're
said
leaving
yes to
them the
setbacks.
same, or we're changing them?
We're leaving them as
proposed.
existing code, so we're
Right.
changing the proposed.
Okay.
Oh, or not, okay. So setbacks are,
So before Ron concludes his motion, I want to make sure staff has our motion.
setback.
So it's as proposed.
I didn't get the part about the setbacks.
Yeah,
Is
I
it
didn't
staying the same as it is, or as it was, as it is?
Staying the same as it is.
So the current standard, sorry to jump in, the current standard is whatever the most restrictive contiguous zoning is.
For
So
setbacks.
it will depend. If they're next to single family, you're going to look at something like that's on the right hand of the screen here, the existing code.
Right.
Yeah, that 10, 6, and 20, that's just single-family, small lot. That's used
And we're
as
not
the
necessarily
example.
saying we agree with that. We're just saying that needs to go into a further conversation.
And we further understand that as situations come up and per property, city
This
is
is
going to
changed
do
to
what
the
they
code.
need to. This is that we don't want to make these changes to the code permanent.
Well, we are.
We don't want to make the currently proposed 0, 7, and 7. So that's why we're reverting to the existing setbacks. No changes to that.
And the building, the build-to line, was that no also?
Yes, that's part of the setback
That's
proposal.
part of the no,
Right.
okay.
But right now, there is no build-to line, and we're
Right,
saying that
that's
we
why I
want
was-
one.
That's what I wasn't sure if you were
Yeah.
going to address that separately, so setbacks.
I don't know, I'm in support of the setbacks, I think. It makes sense. We're talking just about schools on just these parcels, I think makes sense as is, or as proposed.
So we have a motion on the table.
We have a motion.
John, do you want to
on it.
do you want to make a motion to change the setbacks as? I mean, because like we could make a motion that says setbacks is all 20 feet, like
Have a
he
motion.
said.
I think we should add a build
Wait a
to
second.
line.
Wait a second. We have a motion, we had a second, right?
No, we
No,
don't have
we
a
have
second.
not had a
We haven't
second.
had a second.
Go for it.
Okay, so I was just saying, I think we should add a build to line. But otherwise, the setbacks would be as dictated by the nearest contiguous zone.
So would your build to line be 20 feet, or do you like that leeway at the 0 to 20?
I'm not an expert, I don't know, but if that's what's being proposed and that, I think, so we were given, school district wants to build to line of 0 to 10 feet is what's in this letter that we've been given, so they're in support of a build to line. So whether it's 10, 20, something like that, I'm in support of that.
We can give them a compromise, 10 to 15.
No, I don't want to go more than the
Yeah.
20.
17'6".
So, what is the motion? We've got to have, I mean, you keep changing it and.
Right, we're still having discussion. We're trying to nail down our motion is what's happening right now.
All right, so let's write this down.
Was there a second to John?
There's no second yet.
John hasn't even clarified.
Hasn't made a motion yet.
Yeah, I thought there was a second.
I'm not an expert,
I know, that's the problem. None of us are.
it's weird making
Or maybe that's the
recommendations
point.
when they're not informed.
Understanding
We're not
that,
supposed to be a panel of experts.
understanding that, the city has looked at it and the school district has looked at it. There's been input from the community. And, I mean, we have to take their knowledge that looking at this all the time with some degree of value. We can't just sit here and say, you can change it up or down.
This is giving the
But-
city a tool to do that, right?
What?
This is giving the city a tool to institute a build to line, which they previously didn't have the
Right.
mechanism to do before.
Right.
Build two line of, what do you propose?
20 feet. I'll just,
I agree. Build to a line of 20 feet.
Okay.
Again, if there is a problem with the site, there will be negotiations, but it's still in the code that it will be 20 feet, and you're
So
comfortable
we
with
have
that?
an amendment to.
No, we don't need an
No,
amendment
no.
because there was no
Yeah.
second.
Okay. Got it.
I still am not completely clear on
Ron, are you
the-
still making the motion with this build to?
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking
Including?
this through. So if all we're doing is we're modifying CFF, we don't need to worry about tree retention. We don't need to mention those. All we need to mention are the things that we're going to change.
No, because right now, the proposed code is what's in front of us. So if we're not voting on the proposed code, we need to say what's different about the proposal. So we're saying that the tree retention is not correct, that we are putting it at the 12.5 as our guide for the existing code, unless you'd like to change that. Is there a different percentage, Ron, that you would like? I'm using the 12.5 because that's what's existing. And obviously, it's not pie in the sky where I say you need to keep 100,
Right, no, I'm saying if we leave it existing, then we don't need to mention that right now. All we're doing is.
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, we do, because we're voting on the.
We're voting on the
proposed change.
proposal, we're not voting on the existing code.
So you can like break this into two pieces and say, we're recommending no changes to, oh, sorry. We're recommending no changes to tree retention, to side and rear yard setbacks, forgot what else.
impervious.
Impervious.
No.
No, you are making a recommendation
Yep.
to impervious. So those two items.
And the parking, and the I don't think you're changing the structured parking, are you?
No, we are.
No, what you're saying is you're making no revision to existing code for those two items,
Correct.
but then
Right.
you're
Modifying the proposal.
modifying the administration's recommendation by changing impervious to 75%. What else do we talk about?
Just the setbacks and the retention, everything
Yeah,
else
that's
where.
it.
And, well, if you keep the build to line, it's just the side and rear yard setbacks don't change.
Well, I think we're taking out the 0 for the build to line. We're not saying 0 to 20. We're not saying the build to line can be 0, are we?
Well, then you're
No.
creating
Yes.
then you're creating a setback, right? Then you're saying they have to exactly put the building at 20 feet? It
No,
can't be
unless
21 or 19, right?
Unless they get an exemption from staff
Yeah.
based on their
That's what we're
proposal.
trying to.
We're trying to avoid putting the administration in the position of always bending the rules, right? I mean, that's part of this is a little bit more,
That's because you're
surety.
just building into the code that the rules are constantly bent. Why do we want crooked rules? That doesn't make any
So,
sense.
5 to 20 feet? I mean, can you not have 0?
Well,
Would
right
that
now it's.
make you happy?
I mean, I would look at the existing code. Right now, we have front is 10, so then I would say,
It's for single-family, small lot only.
right, so that's what I have, so this is if the staff wants to give me other numbers to base it on, because we're tweaking, but right now,
There's a lot of areas where there are 0 setback, right?
so the difference is, right now, code is 10 to infinite. There's no maximum.
Right.
What the build to sets the max, right? And so
don't
if
want
it's, but you typically put a range in. So if you want to go 10 to 20, or 0 to 20, or whatever to 20, there should be there should be some
range.
flexibility there.
So you're saying build to line says, if we say 0 to 20, they have to build within 0 to 20 of the
Property
boundary.
line, on the front.
That's what they
We
want
really want
also.
that?
Well, that's what the schools.
that's what they're asking for right now.
Yeah.
And I was not satisfied by the answer. I understand that they feel pressure, but I did not get a satisfactory answer that they say these setbacks have been studied, these setbacks are no problem. I didn't hear that. I did not hear a clear answer that this does not, that they've
That came from the
thoroughly studied these
superintendent.
setbacks.
You're talking about from the school district?
Yeah,
There's a letter from,
I know. I read the letter.
okay, where the superintendent is saying setbacks 0 feet preferred, 7 feet possible, and then build 2 lines 0 to 10 feet. So the school district is saying that's
So do we want to do 7 to 20?
7 to
I would like that.
It sounds like we have some questions
Yeah, we're
about it. It
kinda
sounds like I'm not the only one. A
We-
lot of us have some questions about these,
Yeah,
about
there's-
these setbacks.
So a setback provides a minimum distance that the building sets back from the property line. The build-to provides a variance there. And if we ended up with a site that was in a downtown urban area and you wanted to put the outside wall of the building at the back of the sidewalk to align with other development, then you're at 0 feet. And in that kind of a case, you might not, and I don't think the city would want to have a 20-foot setback or a 10-foot setback that means that they're going to have to make an administrative decision to align the building or make it fit into a truly downtown core urban context. That build-to line at 0 to 10 or 0 to 20 feet allows for some flexibility, and either one of those would be acceptable.
If it were built in an area where all the other buildings are up to the sidewalk, wouldn't that be reflected in the existing code for the contiguous area or not?
No, because the least restrictive area could be on the other corner, which would be single-family residential, which would require
Isn't it the
a
most,
10-foot front setback.
the most
and-
restrictive, though?
The most restrictive meaning the least amount of
Least
developable
urban.
space.
Right.
It almost seems like it would make sense to have it as a objective code so that the most restrictive boundary would match to the most restrictive boundary. In other words, if you had 0 on one side and you had a 20 on the other side, you would have matching. If the other properties, if you have properties on one side that are 20, and you have properties on the other side that are 0, then you could match the building to conform with both sides.
In a 0 to 20 build line. which relates to primarily the front, but
I think 0 to 20 is,
I don't like the idea of giving 0 to 20 because all of the sites that we're looking at are not those downtown urban situations now. And I understand this is code and it's going to be long-term, but I still don't like the idea of providing that as an option.
so for
In many
instance,
of the
the
cases.
existing admin street, Holly is the current line of your core. So everything across the street can conform to the urban standards.
Except for that boundary would be up to 0. If we did the 0 to 20,
Yeah, and they're also talking about the potential administration building would need a
So
0.
part of it was trying to align things with what could well be adjacent zoning. Part of it's trying to align with a number of different possibilities and potential things that would come along, because it sort of boils down to defining what we have to look at in acquisition of a site. If we know what our building area is going to be, we know that we have to provide a certain number of parking spaces. If we're being compact, we're going to have to do structured parking. But impervious area and setbacks sort of define perimeters and say, you're going to have to acquire this much land. And when you're going into a competitive market situation and you're putting contingencies on the purchase, it makes it more difficult. And those contingencies then have to be predicated on the fact that we're actually going to get a variance for this or that or another thing, which is months and months and months down the road. So it just makes the whole process more difficult.
so could we?
Thank you for that clarification. That makes a difference.
Yeah. Question for Keith. If we decide to go with a 0 to 20 with a director oversight, would that be acceptable? That would give us checks and balances. Instead of just giving the school district a blank check, I do trust you. But it would just allow for checks and balances.
Don't they already have to go for exceptions? So that would be
It would be code
the,
The code would allow them to build to 0.
without having to get
So-
permission. They could just do it, but
0 to 20 or whatever made sense, and each individual project is going to have to come in for a very detailed review.
right.
Yeah, that's a good point. It will.
The 0 through, anything less than 20 would have to go to for director approval.
Community approval.
I think anything
Not if
over
it's in the
20
code.
feet would have to come in for a variance.
Well, if we put in the 0 through 20 with director oversight, you wouldn't have to get a variance. You just have to ask director for approval.
For anything over 20 feet.
Right.
all of this has to go through level 3 review
Yeah,
though.
yeah. I'm comfortable with that.
So if there's a 0 to 20 and it has to go through level 3 review and 0 is not appropriate, then that'll come up during the level 3 review.
Yeah.
Okay, so are we now comfortable with that?
Yes.
Okay, that's
And
Progress.
do remember
progress,
that
yes.
under-drained playfields are impervious surface. So there may be a pretty big area that's open space playfield, it's still impervious.
Yes, we discussed that.
Okay, so
Okay.
we're 75%.
Yep.
0 to 20. The,
So I can,
So does that mean there's no changes to the setback? It sounds like everyone's fine with the side 7, rear
Right.
7.
I thought you
Yes.
guys were gonna say, you guys can just do the front as a
We're
build-to
fine.
line and leave the sides and the rear
No,
under existing code if you wanted.
we're good.
Okay.
you want to leave it as existing, so that's.
Leave it as proposed.
Leave it as
Leave it as
proposed.
As proposed, the 7 feet. Okay, so,
That's the setback.
Setbacks.
so the only change
Setback
To
is as
proposed.
to
only-
propose is the 75% and one thing about The tree retention.
Yes, the tree retention.
Everything else is
Retention and
except-
minimum density, oh, I guess minimum
It's already the
density,
same.
in this example is the same. Should we
Okay,
say
so-
minimum density should be the same as existing?
It is.
It is.
It is.
Okay,
It is
so,
only in the single-family small lot example given. That could be a different density for different zones.
They said this was the most conservative.
Yeah.
this
That
is
what
the
it's
thing that
true.
they could butt up against.
Right.
Yes,
I would
okay.
think that commercial would be more, okay, never mind.
Okay, so, do I have a motion for those two exemptions?
I will make that motion to have
Change our
the
proposal.
proposed code, except for modifying it to have a 75% impervious surface, and to modify the tree retention to keep the existing code,
Retain the existing
In the
retain
existing
the
code,
existing code
for tree retention.
for tree retention.
which is
yeah.
25% and may be reduced to 12.5 with
Yes.
within the review.
So that's the real one.
Can you repeat that back to us?
I don't want to hear it anymore.
Oh. Motion to keep the proposed code except for modifying the 75% impervious surface and retain the existing code for tree retention.
Yes.
Yes.
And that has the two amendments that we already passed about policy and the direction of schools as well attached to that.
Those were
Earlier.
separate
They're separate,
votes.
but yes.
Okay.
I second.
Those were separate votes, though.
All those in
Very-
favor, say
I
aye.
don't think there's been a second yet.
We just did.
Oh, I'm sorry, we did, okay.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Is there something else on the docket that we have to discuss?
No, there isn't, Joan.
No. Normally you come up with the list of when the next meetings are, so people know exactly what's going on. No more on this.
Next steps.
What is the next meeting? The 27th I have is architectural review. Is that still correct?
Oh, my gosh.
7/27, or did that change?
Is that a public
A
maybe.
forum?
discussion, it's a discussion.
It's a discussion, okay.
And what is our next meeting after that?
Tuesday, August 1st, on end of days? Or is that?
That's
has been-
happening. So we're pairing you guys with Urban Village Development Commission to talk about ending the development agreements for the Highlands and Talus, because we basically have to put replacement code in for both of those as the contract development agreements go to term.
So there will be a meeting on August the
Because we haven't been
1st.
doing enough. We need to do more stuff.
Didn't I
Do you know,
see-
usually UEDC meets at a different time than we do. Do you know if we're on their clock or they're on ours?
So Tuesday, it's going to be
Would be their
UBDC. So time-wise.
It's gonna be 7 then?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I know that
I
we're
don't
still
know.
trying to work out the mechanics of that, but it might be at a 7.
Yeah, that's-
To match
that-
up with
they
their
meet.
standard meeting time.
I thought I saw a date of the 31st.
That's when the public hearing is for that, for architectural review.
August the
But that's on your schedule.
We're doing the 31st and then the 1st.
We actually have 4 meetings, 5 meetings in
I'm
August.
going to write some of this down.
I can send it to you tomorrow.
Do you mind?
great.
That would be great,
Well, usually
especially,
I put these on the end of your agenda each time, but it went out, Jennifer was too fast for me, so I couldn't put the updated one. But so far, I will send this out tomorrow morning, but there's 2 of them on Tuesdays in August,
Okay,
and 2 of them are on Thursdays, so it's
Okay.
exciting.
okay. So anything else for the good of the order? The meeting, I will close the meeting at 9:30.
Joan, can we do the
Still
one?
on air.